Chapter 849. The world announcement was repeated 3 times, instantly causing the entire world channel to explode. F***CK. F***CK. What did I just hear? Li Yuanba? You didn't hear wrongly. It's Li Yuanba. F***CK. Are you kidding me? Isn't Li Yuanba Li Shimon's younger brother? Why did that idiot come to the 3 kingdoms? What's even more ridiculous is that he was subdued by Yi Chen. You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? Damn it, I only want to know one thing right now. Why is Yi Chen's luck so abnormal? How many historical generals do he have now? 9 of them. That's not important. What's important is Li Yuanba. F***CK. Don't you find it strange? Every time a Li Yuanba appears in the 3 kingdoms, another one will appear. Where did these characters come from? Stop guessing. I'll tell you. Li Yuanba came out from the romance of the Sui and Tang dynasties' mystic realm. Of course, although it's called a mystic realm, it's actually a world. As long as we players enter, we can fight monsters and complete missions inside. What I didn't expect was that the characters inside can be brought out. F***CK. If that's the case, doesn't that mean we can just go into those mystic realms and subdue the characters inside? Nonsense. Didn't you see that Yi Chen subdued Li Yuanba? That's definitely the case. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go to the mystic realm. Waha, I'm going to kill everyone and crazily recruit underlings. I'm going too. The world channel was abuzz with activity. After Yi Chen took a look, he curled his lips in disdain. The characters in the mystic realms could indeed be subdued and brought out. Unfortunately, the difficulty was beyond imagination, otherwise I would have done it long ago. How could I just leave those mystic realms alone? Some mystic realms were filled with monsters, some were a graveyard, and some were filled with all kinds of characters. It could be said that there were all kinds of mystic realms, but wanting to subdue the people inside was basically a dream. This was because in Yi Chen's previous life, there were many players who specifically targeted the characters in the secret realm. Unfortunately, without exception, all of them ended in failure. It wasn't until later on that someone painfully came up with a conclusion. If one wanted to subdue a character in the secret plane, one would have to obtain sufficient status and prestige in the secret plane. Furthermore, one would also have to obtain a favorable impression from the character in the secret plane and complete specific missions. In order to achieve this, he had to devote all his energy and time to the secret realm. But if he really did that, it would be equivalent to leaving the main world. The result could only be described with one word: tragic. After all, the 3 kingdoms novice zones were the mainstream. Giving up on the 3 kingdoms novice zones and focusing on the mystic realms was no different from picking up sesame seeds and throwing away watermelons. Rather than that, he might as well use the secret realm as a place to kill monsters, level up, and drop equipment. And now, Yi Chen was able to subdue Li Yuanba, because Li Yuanba had been tricked by Lu Buwei into coming out. Although Yi Chen didn't know what method Lu Buwei had used, the price Lu Buwei had paid was definitely not small. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that Li Yuanba was a special case. If anyone else wanted to replicate this process, they would simply be dreaming. Thinking of this, Yi Chen looked directly at Li Yuanba. Then, he quickly walked over to Li Yuanba and helped Li Yuanba up. Looking at the excited Li Yuanba, Yi Chen couldn't help but smile. Then, he opened his mouth and said, "From today onwards, you will be the 15th general of the reincarnation Immortal City. You will lead an army of 100,000. As soon as Yi Chen finished speaking, Li Yuanba's eyes lit up. Then, he bowed to Yi Chen excitedly and said loudly, "Yuanba swears to follow my lord to death." Li Yuanba was already very happy to be able to follow Yi Chen. Who would have thought that Yi Chen would give him the authority to lead an army? What did this mean? Not only did Yi Chen value him, but he also didn't treat him as an outsider. How could Li Yuanba, who realized this, not be excited? How could he not be excited? As soon as Li Yuanba finished speaking, the system's notification sounded again. Ding! Li Yuanba's loyalty plus 30. Advanced to loyal. As soon as the system's notification ended, Yi Chen couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Not bad, not bad. Another loyal subordinate thinking of this, Yi Chen helped Li Yuanba up again. Then, he patted Li Yuanba's shoulder and said, "Do well in the future. Don't disappoint me. I swear that I will not disappoint you." When Li Yuanba heard this, he nodded his head heavily and replied. After hearing Li Yuanba's words, Yi Chen nodded with satisfaction and said, "Yuanba, Yuanba, I will teach you a lesson from the Reincarnation Immortal City. Yuanba, the generals of Reincarnation Immortal City will learn a cultivation technique from me. Are you willing to learn it?" When Li Yuanba heard this, his eyes lit up and he hurriedly bowed and said loudly, "I'm willing." Yi Chen was an existence that was even more awesome than Li Yuanba's master. Now that Yi Chen said that he was going to teach him a cultivation technique, how could a martial arts maniac like Li Yuanba not be willing to learn? When Yi Chen heard Li Yuanba's excited words, he couldn't help but smile and said, "I have 3 techniques that I can teach you. The first one is the Green Lotus Sword technique. The second one is the Chaos Talisman. The third one is the Killing Sword technique. Which one do you choose?" When Li Yuanba heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he looked at Yi Chen and asked, "My lord, what techniques did the other generals choose?" "Green Lotus Sword technique." When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled and said. When Li Yuanba heard this, he nodded and was about to speak, but he was interrupted by Yi Chen. "Yuanba, you don't have to worry about others. Just follow your heart and make your choice." When Yi Chen said this, Li Yuanba's heart felt warm. Then, he bowed to Yi Chen and said, "My lord, I choose the Green Lotus Sword technique." When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded and said, "In that case, I'll teach you the Green Lotus Sword technique." The 3 chaos martial arts that Yi Chen mentioned were all top-notch. Once they were mastered, they would be able to achieve the martial sacred realm. However, in Yi Chen's opinion, Li Yuanba was more suitable for the sword art of slaughter. As for the reason, it was very simple. Li Yuanba's killing nature was very strong. Moreover, it was much stronger than the other generals. Of course, Li Yuanba's killing nature would only be unleashed on the battlefield. If Li Yuanba cultivated the killing sword technique, then Li Yuanba's killing nature would be completely unleashed on the battlefield. Then, he would become more and more bloodthirsty. Naturally, the more he killed, the stronger he would become. Because of this, Yi Chen believed that Li Yuanba was more suitable to learn the killing sword technique. However, Li Yuanba clearly didn't want to be different from the other generals. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked Yi Chen what the other generals learned. Chapter 850. As soon as Yi Chen finished speaking, Li Yuanba let out a sigh of relief. Then, with a bang, he knelt down and bowed to Yi Chen. "Master, please accept a bow from your disciple." After Li Yuanba finished speaking, he solemnly bowed to Yi Chen to formally acknowledge him as his master. Seeing this, Yi Chen couldn't help but smile. Then, he raised his hand and touched Li Yuanba's forehead. With a buzz, a stream of information appeared and rushed to Li Yuanba's forehead. At the same time, Yi Chen's mind moved and the innate treasure, the cauldron of heaven and earth, appeared. Then, a cloud of creation chi flew out of the cauldron of heaven and earth, and came to Li Yuanba's head in a flash. In the next second, Li Yuanba entered a state of epiphany and started to comprehend the Green Lotus Sword technique. Looking at Li Yuanba, who started to comprehend the Green Lotus Sword technique, Yi Chen sighed inwardly. It was a pity that this guy didn't want to cultivate the killing sword technique, but it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. The killing sword technique was about killing. The more one killed, the stronger it became. However, as the killing intent of the killing sword technique improved, it was very likely that it would backfire if one couldn't control it. In fact, this was the reason why Yi Chen didn't say anything when he heard that Li Yuanba chose the Green Lotus Sword technique instead of the Killing Sword technique. Time passed slowly. When Li Yuanba woke up from his epiphany, Yi Chen waved his right hand and a magic sword, a spiritual level armor, and a spiritual level longbow appeared and flew to Li Yuanba. When Li Yuanba opened his eyes and saw the 3 pieces of equipment floating in front of him, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then, he hurriedly got up and bowed to Yi Chen. "Thank you for your gift, master." When Yi Chen heard this, he chuckled and nodded. He then pointed at the 3 pieces of equipment in front of Li Yuanba. "Drip your blood on them and you can use them." "Yes, master." When Li Yuanba heard this, he was momentarily stunned. After regaining his senses, he hurriedly bowed to Yi Chen. After he finished speaking, he bit his index finger and dripped his blood onto the 3 pieces of equipment. The instant Li Yuanba's blood essence dripped onto the 3 pieces of equipment, a bright red light flashed. Then, the 3 pieces of equipment disappeared. Li Yuanba, who was aware of this, was once again stunned. Then, he looked at Yi Chen with a dull expression and called out, "Yi Chen, what are you doing?" "Master, this is, when you follow me to the untainted land, you will find that there are more powerful pieces of equipment there." When Yi Chen heard this, he couldn't help but smile. Then, he opened his mouth and said, "It's just a crooked spiritual weapon. Don't make a fuss about it. When you ascend to the untainted land with me, you will find that there are more powerful pieces of equipment there." When Li Yuanba heard this, he immediately regained his senses and knelt on the ground with a bang. In the next second, Li Yuanba solemnly kowtowed and said, "Master, you have saved my life." Master saved Yuanba and made Yuanba no longer muddle-headed. Master didn't mind Yuanba's stupidity and accepted Yuanba as a disciple. Master taught Yuanba a top-notch cultivation technique and even gave Yuanba a divine weapon. Yuanba will remember this favor forever. When Li Yuanba said this, he fiercely kowtowed 3 times. Bang, bang, bang! After Li Yuanba finished kowtowing, he immediately looked up at Yi Chen. Then, he raised 3 fingers and shouted to the sky. "I, Li Yuanba, swear to the heavens that I will follow Master forever. If I violate this oath, my soul will be destroyed." As soon as Li Yuanba finished his words, a thunderous sound that shook the heavens and the earth was instantly heard. Boom, boom, boom. Obviously, Li Yuanba's oath was answered by the heavens and the earth. Seeing this, Yi Chen smiled and nodded. Then, he stretched out his hand and helped Li Yuanba up. "Yuanba, the reincarnation immortal city will be your home in the future, and I will be your family." Li Yuanba was not someone from the 3 Kingdoms period. It could be said that Li Yuanba had no one to rely on here. If Yi Chen did not say this, Li Yuanba would very likely feel lonely. This could have a big or small impact on Li Yuanba. As the Lord, Yi Chen naturally did not want this to happen. Otherwise, Yi Chen would not have said this. As soon as Yi Chen finished his words, Li Yuanba's heart immediately warmed. Then, he bowed to Yi Chen and said, "Thank you, Master." When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled and patted Li Yuanba's shoulder. Then, he said, "You are not alone in this world. In this world, you are not alone. Just remember this." Li Yuanba's eyes reddened. He nodded heavily and said, "I will remember it." When Yi Chen saw Li Yuanba's reddened eyes, he sighed inwardly and said, "In 2 days, the Reincarnation Immortal City will be leaving the Reincarnation Immortal City. In another 2 days, my Reincarnation Immortal City will set off for the overseas expedition. Yuanba, once you arrive at the Reincarnation Immortal City, quickly select 100,000 soldiers." "Yes, my lord." When Li Yuanba heard this, he tried his best to calm his heart, which had slowed down because he was touched. Then, he bowed to Yi Chen loudly. When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded. Then, he used his mind to distort the space beside him. When Yi Chen saw the distorted space, he said, "You can enter the reincarnation immortal city directly. You'll be able to reach the reincarnation immortal city directly after you enter. When you're there, look for Guo Yi or Mi Zhu first. They'll arrange a place for you to stay. If you need anything, just tell them." "Yes, my lord." When Li Yuanba heard this, he felt warmth in his heart again. He bowed to Yi Chen loudly and walked toward the distorted space. Then, he disappeared. Tomorrow, he would be marrying Big Qiao and Little Qiao. Unfortunately, he could not use the army of the reincarnation immortal city casually. Otherwise, Lu Hong would be furious. When he thought of this, Yi Chen could not help but raise his eyebrows. Then, he used his mind to distort the space in front of him. After glancing at the distorted space, Yi Chen stepped into it and disappeared. Luoyang Yi residence, back residence. Inside the pavilion, the space suddenly distorted. Then Yi Chen, who had left not long ago, stepped out and appeared here. When he saw the empty back residence, Yi Chen nodded with satisfaction. Those maids were obedient and did not come over on their own. I'll go and rest first. Tomorrow, I'll officially marry Big Qiao and Little Qiao. What's left is a world war. When he thought of this, Yi Chen went straight to the main residence in the back residence. The next day, before the sun had even risen, noisy footsteps could be heard coming from the backyard one after another. Although Yi Chen claimed to be resting, he had actually cultivated for the entire night. Then, he opened his eyes. At this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. "Come in." When Yi Chen heard this, he looked at the door and said. As soon as Yi Chen finished speaking, the door opened with a creak. Then, a group of 20 maids walked in one by one, carrying a groom's robe with complicated craftsmanship, a dazzling array of jade ornaments, incense, and other things. When all the palace maids entered the door, the head of the palace maids at the front immediately stepped forward and bowed to Yi Chen with great respect. "Lord Yu of Beach, it's getting late. You should take a bath and change your clothes." Chapter 851. After Yi Chen heard the words of the head maid, he nodded with a smile and then straightened up. When the head palace maid saw this, she clapped her hands towards the door. Clap, clap. 4 palace maids around the age of 18 walked in, carrying a wooden bucket. Steam rose from the wooden bucket. It was obviously filled with warm water. Yi Chen sighed inwardly as he watched the 4 palace maids carry the wooden bucket in silence. The veins on their foreheads were clearly popping out. The riches and honor in this world are mostly built on the hard work of others. I am now one of those people who is enjoying it. Fortunately, when I become the emperor in the future, the palace maids who serve me will become extraordinary existences. They will no longer work so hard like ordinary people. Thinking of this, Yi Chen waved his right hand in the air, and the wooden bucket instantly flew up. Then, it came to Yi Chen's side and landed steadily on the ground. The palace maids in the room were all stunned when they saw this. The 4 palace maids carrying the wooden bucket were also stunned. They bowed to Yi Chen. "Thank you, Lord Yu of Beach." Yi Chen couldn't help but smile when he heard this. He waved his hand and signaled for the 4 palace maids to leave. When the 4 palace maids carrying the wooden buckets saw this, they did not dare to delay. They hurriedly bowed to Yi Chen and then retreated one by one. When the leader of the palace maids saw this, she immediately brought another palace maid to Yi Chen's side and bowed. "Lord Yu of Beach, this servant will help you bathe and change your clothes." Yi Chen nodded when he heard this. The leader of the palace maids saw this and hurriedly came forward to help Yi Chen take off his clothes. Then she helped Yi Chen bathe. Yi Chen originally thought that bathing was just taking a bath. Who would have thought that the entire process involved putting in flower petals, spices, and personal bathing? There were so many steps. Although the process was a little complicated, Yi Chen didn't stop it. Of course, Yi Chen wasn't tempted either. The palace maids weren't bad-looking, especially the leader of the palace maids. Although she wasn't a first-rate historical beauty, she wasn't too bad. However, today was Yi Chen's wedding day. Even if Yi Chen wanted to, he wouldn't do it casually. After washing up, Yi Chen put on the groom's clothes, the groom's crown, and various precious jade artifacts under the service of the palace maids. When Yi Chen was fully dressed, a palace maid came to Yi Chen with a bronze mirror. She raised the mirror for Yi Chen to see if he was satisfied. Yi Chen looked at himself in the mirror and nodded with satisfaction. Not bad, he was still so handsome. This wasn't because Yi Chen was narcissistic. After all, Yi Chen's appearance wasn't bad to begin with. After the meteor fell and the game was launched, Yi Chen's strength advanced by leaps and bounds. He became a cultivator, and his appearance was slightly modified as a result. It could be said that Yi Chen's current handsomeness was a knockout for all women, from lowless to young married women. This could be easily seen from the palace maids who helped Yi Chen bathe and change his clothes while constantly stealing glances at Yi Chen. When the leader of the palace maids saw that Yi Chen was satisfied, she was immediately delighted. Then, she bowed to Yi Chen and said, "Lord Yu of Beech, the ancestral ranking has been prepared. Lord Yu of Beech can begin to worship the ancestors." In ancient times, when a bride was fetched, she had to worship the ancestors first. Originally, this matter should have been presided over by Yi Chen's family elders. However, Yi Chen was an orphan and didn't have any family elders. Yi Chen didn't understand these things, so the leader of the palace maids who knew about this matter in private prepared this matter in private. When Yi Chen heard the leader of the palace maids' words, he was slightly stunned. Then, he looked at the leader of the palace maids and said, "You've done well. This is my duty." The leader of the palace maids was overjoyed when she heard this. Then, she hurriedly bowed to Yi Chen. When Yi Chen heard the leader of the palace maids' words, he nodded with a smile. Then, with a wave of his right hand, a purple gold brick and 190 purple gold coins appeared in an instant. Then, they flew straight to the leader of the palace maids and the other palace maids in the room. When the palace maids saw this, they were all stunned. Then, they all bowed to Yi Chen in ecstasy and said, "Thank you, Lord Yu of Beech, for your reward." When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded with a smile. Then, he looked at the leader of the palace maids who was trembling with excitement because she had received a purple gold brick and said, "Lead the way." "Yes, Lord Yu of Beech." When the leader of the palace maids heard this, she immediately came back to her senses and hurriedly bowed in response. After that, she walked out with light steps. The leader of the palace maids couldn't be blamed for this. After all, she had received a purple gold brick, not a gold brick. Its value was something that ordinary nobles of the great Han Empire could not exchange for even if they combined their entire family's wealth. It was precisely because the leader of the palace maids knew the value of the purple gold brick and how great it was that she was so excited that her footsteps were light and light. Yi Chen glanced at the leader of the palace maids who was quite excited and raised his eyebrows involuntarily. Then, he walked straight out. As he walked forward, Yi Chen arrived at the back of the Yi residence, in a separate room. There was a tall table here. On top of it were 3 golden tablets, 1 large and 2 small. Looking at the material, it was obvious that they were made of pure gold. This palace maid was quite thoughtful. She was actually willing to pay out of her own pocket to make a pure gold tablet. Thinking of this, Yi Chen glanced at the leader of the palace maids who was reverently and respectfully at the door. Then, with a wave of his right hand, a saint-level cultivation method appeared. Then, Yi Chen threw it to the leader of the palace maids. When the leader of the palace maids saw this, she subconsciously reached out to catch the saint-level cultivation method. Then, she was stunned. Meritorious deeds are rewarded and mistakes are punished. You deserve it. When the leader of the palace maids heard this, she suddenly trembled and then knelt on the ground with a bang. Bang, bang, bang. After 3 heads, the leader of the palace maids bowed with a choked voice. "Thank you, Lord Yu of Beech, for your reward." The saint-level cultivation method that Yi Chen gave seemed casual, but in the eyes of the natives of this world, it was a great gift. This was because no matter who it was, if they obtained the saint-level cultivation method, their family would definitely produce a marshal general. Moreover, it would be a standard marshal general. If they were lucky, it was even possible for them to become a first-class or super-first-class marshal general. In this way, it would be difficult for the family that obtained the saint-level cultivation method not to rise. And this was the reason why the leader of the palace maids was so excited. When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled and nodded. Then, with a wave of his right hand, a gust of spiritual chi of heaven and earth appeared and rushed directly to the leader of the palace maids. In an instant, the blood-red mark on the leader's forehead was completely removed. Sensing this, the leader of the palace maids subconsciously touched her forehead. Then, she saw that her face suddenly became extremely pale. The leader of the palace maids suddenly remembered that today was the wedding day of the Prince Yu of Han, Yi Chen, and blood could not be seen. But she had just kowtowed out of gratitude. Even if her forehead was not broken, it would definitely be bright red. This result would definitely make Yi Chen unhappy. Otherwise, why would Yi Chen suddenly remove the mark on her forehead just now? When she thought of Yi Chen's displeasure, the leader of the palace maids could not help but tremble. "You, Lord Yu of Beekchai." When Yi Chen heard the leader of the palace maids' panicked words, he could not help but smile. Then, he waved his hand and said, "It's okay." When the leader of the palace maids heard this, she immediately heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly bowed to Yi Chen. "Jialan, thank Lord Yu of Beech for your kindness." When Yi Chen heard this, he could not help but smile. He was about to enter the house to complete the process of worshipping the ancestors when he was stunned. Chapter 852. The good opportunity that Yi Chen was thinking of was undoubtedly subduing Jia Su. Yi Chen had wanted to wait until Dongda was killed before subduing Jia Su. However, there was no need for that now because Jialan had appeared. After all, Yi Chen was Yu of Beech of the Great Han Empire, the general of Agile Cavalry, and the governor of Yuzhou. If he wanted to subdue Jia Su, he could just go straight to him. There was no need to go through so much trouble. However, that was not the case at all. This was because Jia Su was following Dongda. To be precise, he was following Dongda's son-in-law, Niu Fu. If Yi Chen wanted to recruit Jia Su directly, Dongda would definitely not dare to reject him. He would even respectfully send Jia Su to Yi Chen's residence. However, Yi Chen could not do that because there would only be one result. Yi Chen would owe Dongda a favor. If Yi Chen had not reached the Violet Mansion realm, this would not be a big deal. Yi Chen could completely ignore it. However, things were different now. Yi Chen was in the Tribulation Transcendent stage, and could become an immortal at any time. Yi Chen could not simply owe someone a favor. If he owed someone a favor, he would have to repay it. Otherwise, Yi Chen would definitely attract an inner demon during his Tribulation Transcendence. It was precisely for this reason that Yi Chen did not take action to recruit Jia Su even though he knew that Jia Su was a top-tier historical civil official of the Three Kingdoms and even knew his position. Who would have thought that Jialan would be assigned to my residence? I wonder if this Jialan has the same name and surname. I hope not. At this thought, Yi Chen looked straight at Jialan and asked, "Jiawan? Jarvan, do you know him?" The moment Yi Chen spoke, the leader of the palace maids, Jialan, was stunned. Jialan quickly bowed and said, "I'm sorry. Lord Yu of Beech, he is this servant's uncle." It was really thinking of this, Yi Chen could not help but raise his eyebrows. He then looked at Jialan and said, "I have a task for you. Are you willing to accept it?" "This servant is willing." When Jialan heard this, she was stunned once again. When she came to her senses, she immediately bowed and said, "This servant is willing." When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded with satisfaction and said, "That's right. Very good. Immediately write a letter to your clan uncle. As for the content, you can decide for yourself. However, you must remember that you must get him to agree to come to Luoyang. Yes, Lord Yu of Beach, this servant will go and prepare. When Jialan heard this, she hastily bowed and said. When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded with a smile and said, That's right. Go. Once you're done, find a clever servant and I'll send it to your uncle in Liangzhou. Yes, Your Excellency Ghost King. Jialan hurriedly replied when she heard this. She then jogged out of the place. When Yi Chen saw this, he smiled and walked straight through the door that had been set up to look like an ancestral hall. Once inside, Yi Chen glanced at the 3 tablets made of pure gold on the offering table. He then picked up the 3 incense sticks on the table, lit them, and stuck them into the incense burner. A second later, Yi Chen lifted his robes and knelt on the prayer mat. Yi Chen was an orphan. He did not know who his parents were, much less who his ancestors were. However, the blood of the Yi clan flowed in Yi Chen's veins. No matter how powerful Yi Chen was, Yi Chen could not deny this fact. It was for this reason that Yi Chen was so willing to simply kneel and pay his respects to his ancestors. As for holding a grudge against his parents, Yi Chen would have done so in the past. But now Yi Chen would not. This was because there was no need to. Of course, this also had to do with the fact that Yi Chen would soon undergo tribulation and become an immortal. His body would be completely transformed, and he would be completely separated from the mortal world. To be more precise, Yi Chen's kneeling was an explanation for the past, or perhaps an end to the fetters of the mortal world. After solemnly kowtowing 3 times, Yi Chen let out a long breath. He then stood up and unhesitatingly turned around and left. Outside the door, Yi Chen headed straight for the front courtyard of the Yi residence. Today, he was about to marry Princess De Qiao and Princess Chang'el Xiao Qiao. Yi Chen still had many ceremonial matters to attend to. Naturally, he would not waste any time here. Just as Yi Chen arrived at the courtyard of the front residence, a deafening shout instantly rang out. Greetings, Your Highness. Their voices were in unison, loud and clear, causing the surrounding air to hum and echo endlessly. Hearing this, Yi Chen could not help but stare blankly. Following the sound, he saw Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guo Yi, Zhao Meng, Gao Shun, Guan Er, Zhang San, Zhang Liao, and his other subordinate. These fellows, Yi Chen originally did not intend for them to come. After all, this wedding was for Lu Hong to see. In the future, they would hold a real wedding. Who would have thought that Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guo Yi, Zhao Meng, Gao Shun, and Qin Gong would all come? The reason for their arrival was very simple. It was to congratulate Yi Chen, the only king with a different surname in the Great Han Empire. More importantly, it was to announce to the Great Han Empire that they were the subordinates of Yi Chen, Yu of Beach of the Great Han Empire. They were absolutely loyal subordinate. Just as Yi Chen thought of this, the thunderous neigh of a warhorse suddenly rang out. Neigh, neigh, at the same time, a golden light flashed and the Pegasus Little Gold appeared in front of Yi Chen. Looking at the Pegasus Little Gold with a red glow on its head, Yi Chen could not help but smile. Then, he patted its head and said, I have neglected you these past few days. I've neglected you for the past few days. Once the wedding is over, you should also come to my world. There, you can break through without worry and work hard on your cultivation. It won't be long before I take you away from this world. Little Gold's strength could not increase if it stayed in the game world. Moreover, Yi Chen could not ascend to the Eldritch world. Therefore, Yi Chen wanted Little Gold to go to the real world. This was because only in the real world would Pegasus Shao Jin not be sealed. Only in the real world could Pegasus Shao Jin's strength increase without any worries. As for riding Little Gold to the battlefield, Yi Chen did not need it at this moment. After all, Yi Chen had already reached the tribulation passing stage. It was not important whether he had a warhorse to ride or not. As soon as Yi Chen finished speaking, the Pegasus Little Gold immediately snorted and nodded its head vigorously. The Pegasus Little Gold's bloodline was extraordinary. Naturally, it knew that it couldn't help Yi Chen now. It was because Little Gold knew this that it agreed without hesitation. When Yi Chen saw this, he could not help but smile. Then, he looked at Guo Yi and asked, "Fengshao, how many troops did you bring?" "My lord, 1,000 cavalry and 1,000 infantry. They are all from the Samsara Legion." When Guo Yi heard this, he hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. Chapter 853. Hearing this, Yi Chen nodded and then said, "In that case, let's go and welcome the bride with me." Although Yi Chen didn't want Lu Hong to be afraid of the reincarnation Immortal City, he wouldn't be angry with his subordinates for acting on their own this time. After all, his subordinates had good intentions. They didn't want Yi Chen's wedding to be too shabby. Even if this wedding was just a show for Lu Hong, they didn't want to see such a result. This was what Yi Chen's subordinates thought. As soon as Yi Chen finished his words, Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guo Yi, Guan Er, Zhang San, Gao Shun and other military and civil officials bowed and saluted in unison. "Yes, my lord." Hearing this, Yi Chen smiled and then mounted his horse. Riding Golden Pegasus, he went out of the door. Outside the door, 2,000 Samsara Legion soldiers in festive costumes knelt down on one knee and then shouted in unison, "Greetings, my lord." When Yi Chen heard this, he chuckled and nodded. Then, he continued to ride his horse forward. Standing at the front of the wedding procession was a group of 100 musicians. When they saw Yi Chen, the leader immediately shouted, "Yi Chen, let's go." In the next second, a classical piece of music that Yi Chen had never heard before sounded. The sound was mellow and pleasant and full of joy. As the music sounded, the band slowly moved forward. Seeing this, Yi Chen immediately urged his horse forward. Behind him were Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guo Yi, Guan Er, Zhang San and others who were going out. Behind them were 2,000 Samsara Legion soldiers. The procession was majestic, and the gongs and drums shook the sky. Soon, they came to the street. The moment the wedding procession came to the street, deafening cheers sounded. "Congratulations, Lord Yu of Beech! Congratulations, Lord Yu of Beech!" Although the cheers were not uniform, they came one after another, shaking the air of Luoyang Street and making a buzzing sound. Looking in the direction of the sound, the people of Luoyang were cheering on both sides of the street. Seeing this, Yi Chen couldn't help but smile and then waved behind him. Dian Xiong, who was closest to Yi Chen, immediately urged his horse forward and then bowed to Yi Chen. "My lord, tell the soldiers to give some money to the people of Luoyang." Hearing this, Yi Chen, with a wave of his right hand, 1,000 chests full of gold coins, instantly appeared beside the walking Samsara Legion soldiers. When Dian Xiong heard this, he hastily cupped his fists and bowed. "My lord! My lord!" After saying this, Dian Xiong turned his horse around and ran to the back of the wedding procession to convey Yi Chen's orders. The Samsara Legion soldiers, who were stunned by the sudden appearance of the chests of gold coins, heard Dian Xiong's words and bent down to pick up the chests with one hand without thinking. The procession continued to move forward, and the people's cheers and congratulations rose and fell. Soon, even louder cheers sounded from the crowd of commoners. Because what Yi Chen gave out to the commoners were not copper coins or silver coins, but gold coins. This was the first time in hundreds of years in the Great Han Empire that this had happened. How could the people not be excited? Along the way, the cheers shook the heavens. Not long after, the world channel exploded. Yi Chen has set off for the wedding procession. Holy shit! Guess what I just saw? Yi Chen is actually giving out gold coins to the people on the street. Damn, are you serious? Giving out gold coins? Does he have to be so arrogant? There are at least tens of millions of people in Luoyang. How much is he going to give out? 10 million gold coins? What do you know about the world of the rich? Think about it. Yi Chen has made so many world announcements and earned so many gold coins and purple coins. It wouldn't matter even if he gave out a few 100 million gold coins, let alone 10 million. Damn it, you guys are talking nonsense. Yi Chen is about to marry De Qiao and Xiao Qiao. Don't you guys want to steal the bride? That's right, let's steal the bride. This is our last chance. Steal De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, use the two-world stone on them, and bring them to the real world. No matter how awesome Yi Chen is, he won't be able to find us. Idiots, you guys dare to have ideas about Boss Yi Chen? You guys should take a good look at yourselves first. Why bother with these idiots? They're just asking for it. Why don't they think about what realm Boss Yi Chen is at right now? They're dreaming. Boss Yi Chen can kill them all with a wave of his hand. Heaven and Earth Alliance wishes you of Beach a happy marriage. Also, we warn all players who want to cause trouble. If you dare to do anything, Heaven and Earth Alliance will hunt you down to the ends of the world. Beauty Alliance wishes you of Beach a happy marriage. Also, we warn all players who want to cause trouble. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, old or young. If you dare to cause trouble, Beauty Alliance will hunt you down to the ends of the world and will not stop until you're dead. Dragon Tiger Sect wishes you of Beach a happy marriage. Also, we warn all players who have evil intentions to stop, or else Dragon Tiger Sect will hunt you down to the ends of the world. Players from Shanghai wish you of Beach a happy marriage. Players from Beijing wish you of Beach a happy marriage. The World Channel was in an uproar, and it kept spamming the screen. After Yi Chen took a look, he narrowed his eyes, and a bone-chilling killing intent flashed past his eyes. A bunch of daring idiot. Come, once you're here, I'll kill all of you one by one. When he thought of this, Yi Chen smiled coldly. Then, with a thought, his powerful divine sense instantly enveloped the entire Luoyang city. Yi Chen did this just in case. Of course, it was also so that he could attack as soon as he sensed that something was wrong. Yes, Yi Chen was at the tribulation stage, and his strength was ridiculously strong. He could completely crush anyone, but De Qiao and Xiao Qiao were just ordinary girls. They did not have any martial arts skills at all. If Yi Chen did not do this, and if some players, especially those hidden forces who had always been hostile to Yi Chen, used powerful items to snatch De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, or even directly attack De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, it would be too late for Yi Chen to regret it. Yi Chen used his spiritual sense to look at De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, who were already dressed in bridal attire and being served by 8 palace maids. Then, with a thought, he instantly scanned the entire palace thrice. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with the palace, Yi Chen heaved a sigh of relief. At this moment, in Yi Chen's residence in Luoyang, Jialan, who was in charge of writing a letter to Jia Su, finished the last stroke. Then, he folded the letter and placed it in an envelope, handing it to a servant who was waiting quietly at the side. Seeing this, Yi Chen's thoughts moved, and the space in Jialan's room suddenly distorted. At the same time, Yi Chen's voice rang out in the room. Take the letter and go in directly. Then, personally hand the letter to Jia Su. If anyone stops you, just say my name. You don't have to worry about anything else. Recommended a godly book, Killing Monsters and Killing Wives in the City. That day, the world's spiritual energy recovered, and the world's progress reached a turning point. That day, monsters appeared and the world became unsafe. That day, Yi Chen obtained the only godly talent, killing monsters and killing wives. That day, Yi Chen's life began to become extraordinary. Ding! Player Yi Chen has successfully killed the gold boss, Miser Rooster. Dropped his wife, Caterpillar Candy. Ding! Player Yi Chen has successfully killed the purple gold boss, Witch of the Black Mountain. Dropped his wife, Empress, lowly form. Ding! Player Yi Chen has successfully killed the dark boss, double-headed gorilla. Dropped his divine weapon, Jingu Bang. Chapter 854. The moment Yi Chen finished speaking, the servant, who had been stunned by the sudden appearance of a distorted space in the room, immediately regained his senses and hastily bowed. Yes, Lord Yu of Beach. After the servant finished speaking, he took the letter and walked into the distorted space, disappearing without a trace. 1,000 miles away, in Liangzhou, the military camp of Dong Gongzi's son-in-law, Niu Fu, suddenly distorted space in a tent reserved for civil servants. A second later, the servant who had been ordered to deliver the letter took a step forward and appeared here. At this moment, in the tent, a middle-aged man with a goatee suddenly stood up and shouted in a deep voice, "Don't worry about it. Who are you?" The servant, who had been dumbfounded by the sudden change in scenery, shivered when he heard this rebuke, but he quickly regained his composure. He recalled what Yi Chen had just said. There was no need to worry about anything. After regaining his senses, the servant looked up at the man who had reprimanded him and bowed. "I am a servant of Lord Yu of Beach's residence in Luoyang. May I ask if you are Mr. Jia Su?" The man with the goatee was taken aback. After regaining his senses, he glanced at the distorted space behind the servant and nodded. "That's me." The servant was delighted to hear this. He hastily took out the letter written by Jia Lan and bowed as he handed it to Jia Su. "This is a letter from your niece, Jia Lan." Upon hearing those words, Jia Su shot a glance at the servant before reaching out to take the letter. He tore it open and began reading it. 10 minutes later, Jia Su folded the letter and placed it in his pocket. He then looked at the servant and said, "Wait a moment. Wait for me for a moment. I'll leave a letter and go with you." After saying that, Jia Su walked to the side of the table and started writing furiously. Not long after, he finished writing a letter explaining why he left without saying goodbye. After taking a look at it, Jia Su used a paperweight to suppress the letter and followed the servant into the distorted space. After a few steps, the two of them disappeared. Luoyang Yi residence. In Jia Lan's room, space suddenly distorted. Then, Jia Su and the servant in charge of delivering letters to Jia Su appeared. Jia Lan greets uncle. When Jia Lan, who had yet to leave, saw Jia Su, she was briefly stunned before she hurriedly bowed. Jia Su smiled and looked at Jia Lan. "Lan, it's been hard on you all these years." Jia Lan's eyes turned red when she heard this. It wasn't hard to understand why Jia Lan was like this. One had to know that if it wasn't for the fact that they had no other choice, no family would send their own children to be maids or servants. Even if Jia Lan's status was much higher and she was a palace maid, she could not get rid of the nature of a servant. To be more precise, Jia Lan's parents weren't rich. They couldn't even afford to feed her. Otherwise, Jia Lan wouldn't have been able to become a palace maid. It was due to this reason that Jia Su told Jia Lan that she had suffered all these years. Upon hearing this, Jia Lan's eyes reddened. It was because she had suffered and felt wronged. More importantly, it was because she saw Jia Su, her family. It's all in the past. Don't think about it. It's your blessing to be able to follow you of Beach. Jia Su saw Jia Lan's sad expression and sighed before he consoled her. Jia Lan nodded while choking with sobs. Although Jia Su's words didn't sound like he was consoling her, they went straight to Jia Lan's heart. In Jia Lan's opinion, it was her blessing to be able to become Yu of Beach Yi Chen's maid in the Great Han Empire. One should know that in the entire Great Han Empire, there wasn't a single noble who would be so easygoing. There wasn't a single noble who would be so generous as to reward a sage-level cultivation technique. Of course, this was only the most basic. The most important thing was that Yi Chen, Yu of Beach's Great Han Empire, was an immortal. How could it not be a blessing to be able to follow an immortal? On the main street of Luoyang, Yi Chen's divine sense enveloped the entire Luoyang. He glanced at Jia Su and transmitted his voice. "Wenhe, I don't have many civil officials under me. Are you willing to follow me?" As soon as Yi Chen's voice sounded in Jia Lan's room, Jia Su bowed to the void without hesitation and said loudly, "Jia Su and Jia Wenhe greet your highness." Jia Su was so straightforward that it was obvious that he had the intention of following Yi Chen. That was the truth. Otherwise, Jia Su wouldn't have followed Yi Chen to Luoyang without hesitation after reading the letter sent by his servant. He also wouldn't have agreed to Yi Chen's request without hesitation. The moment Jia Su spoke, a system notification sounded. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chen for successfully subduing the superclass historical civil officials, Jia Su and Jia Wenhe. The moment the system notification ended, Yi Chen, who was riding on little golden Pegasus, could not help but grin. Not bad, not bad. Another superclass historical civil official subordinate. As Yi Chen thought this, a world notification sounded. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chen for being the fourth person to obtain the loyalty of the superclass historical civil officials, Jia Su and Jia Wenhe. Special reward to player Yi Chen, 10 million taels of gold. The world notification was repeated 3 times in a row, instantly causing an uproar in the world channel. Holy shit! Holy shit! What's going on? Didn't Yi Chen go to fetch the bride? How did he subdue Jia Su, the #1 poison warrior of the 3 kingdoms? Cheating. This is definitely cheating. Yi Chen is riding on his horse now. Jia Su didn't even appear. How did Yi Chen subdue Jia Su? Holy shit, I already said that Yi Chen cheated from the start. No one believed me. Do you believe me now? Holy shit, I'm not convinced. No one cares about cheating in the game. This F***king game, we're going to stop it. Idiot, if you don't want to try it, I'm sure that you'll become a pile of shit in less than a week. Yi Chen, we found out that you were cheating at the start, but we didn't have any evidence, so we let it go. Now that you've cheated again and we've caught you cheating, do you still want to be AB**TCH? Idiot, boss, Yi Chen cheated? Why don't you think about it? This game doesn't even have a code or server. How can you cheat? Why bother with these idiots? They're all idiots with water in their heads. They're just staring at the abnormality. Why don't they think about boss Yi Chen's realm? Goddammit, he's at the tribulation passing stage. With that realm, he can do anything he wants. Is there a need to make such a fuss? That's right, that's right. Anyway, I don't believe that boss Yi Chen cheated. There's no need for him to cheat. With boss Yi Chen's current status, I dare say that no matter who boss Yi Chen wants to recruit, he'll be able to recruit them. You think that Yi Chen will give you benefits just because you flatter him? You're thinking too much. Chapter 855. F***KU. I'm just stating facts. You call this flattery? Use your ass and think carefully. From the beginning until now, boss Yi Chen, other than having good luck and having an explosive start, which one of his gains after that wasn't achieved with a knife and a gun. You call this cheating? Do your great work. Yi Chen, don't pay attention to what those idiots are saying. Let me ask you something. Since you're so awesome, can you tell us some of the secrets you know about the game? That's right. Yi Chen, the real world is getting more and more dangerous. If we humans don't rise up quickly, the real world will be dominated by the shifters sooner or later. That's right. That's right. Yi Chen, for the sake of humanity, reveal some secrets. You don't have to reveal all of them. Just a little will do. You don't want to see the real world being left with only you and everyone else being eaten up by the shifters, right? The world channel was abuzz with activity as it constantly flooded the screen. After Yi Chen took a look, he sneered. A bunch of self-righteous idiot. It's bad enough that they think I'm cheating, but they actually want me to reveal the game's secrets. They must have eaten too much sh*t that their brains aren't working properly. Yi Chen had been reborn. He knew a lot of things and knew a lot of secrets. But so what? For the sake of humanity, he had to reveal the secrets? Bullshit. If Yi Chen revealed all the secrets he knew from his previous life, the human players would benefit from it. But if that happened, how could Yi Chen maintain his current lead? Yi Chen was selfish? Yes. But so what? Could it be that Yi Chen had to sacrifice everything for humanity's sake and then let others rise to the top? In the end, they would join forces to kill Yi Chen? That was definitely impossible. No matter how stupid Yi Chen was, he wouldn't be stupid to that extent. Yi Chen was gauging the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain? When others rose, they would only be grateful to Yi Chen and not plot against Yi Chen. This was King Bulsh T. Because in his previous life, Yi Chen had seen too many schemes, too many betrayals, and too much mutual deception. What integrity, what propriety, what sense of shame, what moral standards had long disappeared without a trace. The only thing left in the real world was the law of the jungle, where the strong preyed on the weak. If Yi Chen couldn't maintain his lead, then Yi Chen would definitely be attacked by the players. As for the reason, it was very simple. At this moment, Yi Chen had obtained too many good things. To be more precise, money moved people's hearts, and benefits mesmerized the eyes. The logic was that simple and crude. It was precisely because of this that Yi Chen had never considered revealing the secrets he knew from the very beginning. Yi Chen did not want to raise a group of ingrates. Thinking up to this point, Yi Chen used his mind and saw an additional sentence appear on the world channel. There is no fairness in this world. Instead of having crooked thoughts, it is better to fight monsters and level up. In addition, a word of advice to everyone. Those who obey me will prosper, and those who defy me will perish. The moment Yi Chen's words appeared on the world channel, it instantly quieted down. After a while, the world channel was flooded with messages again. Boss Yi Chen is right. If you have the time to talk nonsense, it is better to fight monsters and level up and continuously improve your own strength. Boss Yi Chen's words are domineering. Those who obey me will prosper, and those who defy me will perish. Wadha, I finally saw Boss Yi Chen speak on the world channel. Those idiots who are bad-mouthing Boss Yi Chen continue. They wouldn't dare. Even if you gave them more courage, they wouldn't dare. Boss Yi Chen is mighty and domineering. He is invincible. I feel that Boss Yi Chen is giving an ultimatum to those idiots who want to go against Boss Yi Chen and scheme against Yi Chen. Nonsense, of course. Didn't you see? Those who obey me will prosper, and those who defy me will perish. I dare say that as soon as the world war ends, Boss Yi Chen will definitely make a move on all the Lord players. He will also make a move on those infuriated individual players. The world channel was in an uproar because of Yi Chen's words. However, this time, no one dared to say that Yi Chen was cheating. Even more so, no one dared to say that Yi Chen would reveal the game's secret. As for the reason, it was very simple. Those players who had ulterior motives could feel the thick killing intent in Yi Chen's words on the world channel. Yi Chen curled his lips in disdain as he looked at the world channel, which was constantly being flooded with messages, but no one dared to say anything. I haven't killed any players recently, but it doesn't mean that I have become soft-hearted and don't want to kill. Yi Chen smiled coldly at this thought. Then, he used his divine sense to look at Jia Su, who had just arrived at the Yi residence. If I can get Wen He's help, I won't have to worry about not succeeding. Thank you for your praise, Lord. I, Su, will do my best to help you. I won't let you down. Jia Su's eyes lit up when he heard Yi Chen's voice. Then, he bowed to the void and said loudly. Yi Chen, who was riding on Little Gold, couldn't help but smile. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly remembered that Jia Su still had a family member. After regaining his senses, Yi Chen sent a telepathic message. Wen He, where is your family now? My lord, my family is currently in Liangzhou's Guzhong County. They are in a house with 2 entrances and 2 exits in the north of the city. Opposite the main entrance is a pork shop. When Jia Su heard this, he bowed to the void without hesitation. Jia Su's words were very detailed. It was obvious that he understood the hidden meaning in Yi Chen's words. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said this. Yi Chen, who was riding on Little Gold, couldn't help but smile when he heard this. Then, with a thought, his divine sense, which had originally covered the entire Luoyang, spread out to Liangzhou's Guzhang County. In the next second, the space in Jia Su's room suddenly distorted. At the same time, Yi Chen's voice rang out. Go in and bring your family members over. Otherwise, Niu Fu will be unhappy about your departure and take revenge on your family. Yes, my lord. Jia Su was overjoyed when he heard this. He bowed to the void and said loudly. Then, he walked into the distorted space and disappeared. After 10 minutes, Jia Su walked out of the distorted space with a group of people. Yi Chen, who had been releasing his divine sense, couldn't help but smile when he saw this. He then transmitted his voice to Yi Chen. I am marrying De Qiao and Xiao Qiao today. There is no one in the reincarnation immortal city to receive you for the time being. Rest in the guest room of my residence for the time being. Once the wedding is over, I will send you to the reincarnation immortal city. Yes, my lord. When Jia Su heard Yi Chen's voice transmission, he hurriedly bowed to the void and said. Jia Su's family members, who didn't see Yi Chen, were stunned when they heard Yi Chen's voice. However, they quickly recovered and followed Jia Su's example. They bowed to the void and said, Thank you, Lord Yu Beach. Chapter 856. The words of Jia Su's family members were filled with sincerity and respect, but there was also a hint of uneasiness in their tone. This could not be helped. After all, they had traveled from Liangzhou to Luoyang in only one step. Before they even saw Yi Chen, they heard Yi Chen's voice. Jia Su's family naturally knew what was going on with this extraordinary matter. To be more precise, in the hearts of Jia Su's family members, Yi Chen was an immortal. How would a mortal feel when facing an immortal? Without a doubt, it would be uneasiness and respect. Therefore, the behavior of Jia Su's family members was not strange. When Yi Chen, who was riding on the Pegasus, heard the nervous words of the Jia Su family members, he couldn't help but smile. He then transmitted his voice to Yi Chen. You don't have to be so restrained. Come here and treat it as your own home. The moment Yi Chen's voice transmission landed, Jia Su's family members, who had arrived in Luoyang, immediately relaxed. In the next second, Jia Su and his family members bowed to the void. Thank you, Lord Yu of Beach. The moment Jia Su and his family members finished their words, the system notification rang out in Yi Chen's mind. Ding! Jia Su's loyalty plus 30. He has advanced to loyal. When the system notification ended, Yi Chen, who was riding on little gold Pegasus, smiled. Not bad, not bad. Another loyal subordinate. At this thought, Yi Chen transmitted his voice again. Jialan, I'll leave your uncle's family to you. Yes, Lord Yu of Beach. Jialan hurriedly bowed and said loudly after hearing Yi Chen's words. Yi Chen smiled. Then, with a thought, his divine sense, which had enveloped 1/3 of the great Han Empire, shrank until it covered all of Luoyang. Yi Chen released his divine sense and locked onto the entire Luoyang. Naturally, it was because of the players on the World Channel who wanted to steal the bride. Although Yi Chen was not afraid of this, Yi Chen would not be arrogant and not take any precautions. If those players were honest, it would be fine. However, if they weren't, Yi Chen's divine sense would immediately detect the abnormality. After that, Yi Chen would make his move without hesitation and kill him completely. Even if Yi Chen wanted to kill thousands, millions, or even tens of millions of people, Yi Chen would still be soft-hearted or hesitate. This was Yi Chen's decision. It was very cold-blooded and cruel, but Yi Chen would not change his mind or waver. The classical music was still being played. The cheers of the people and the sounds of celebration never stopped. Yi Chen's wedding procession slowly moved forward amidst the waves of celebration. Everything was done in an orderly manner. There were no abnormalities. Time slowly passed. The wedding procession arrived at the entrance of the royal palace. When the royal guards guarding the entrance saw this, they hurriedly bowed to Yi Chen and said loudly, "Greetings, Lord Yu of Beach." "Congratulations, Lord Yu of Beech, on your wedding day!" The shouts of the royal guards were uniform, loud and clear. When Yi Chen heard this, he chuckled and nodded. Then, with a wave of his right hand, a sky full of purple gold coins appeared and flew straight to the royal guards guarding the royal palace's entrance. The royal guards, who had just finished their greetings, were all stunned when they saw this. Then, they widened their eyes. They thought that Yi Chen would reward them, but they never thought that Yi Chen would be so generous. Purple gold coins were a currency that only nobles and large families used. They had never even seen it before, let alone used it. But now, not only did they see it, but they were also about to receive it. How could they not be stunned? When the royal guards came to their senses, 10 purple gold coins floated in front of each of them. When they saw this, the royal guards guarding the royal palace's entrance all trembled. The thought that Lord Yu of Beech is an immortal instantly appeared in the minds of all the royal guards. At this moment, the royal guards guarding the royal palace's entrance all widened their eyes. Then, with a bang, they knelt on the ground. In the next second, the royal guards guarding the royal palace's entrance all shouted in unison, "Thank you, Lord Yu of Beech, for your reward." When Yi Chen heard this, he chuckled and nodded. At this moment, the royal guards all stood up and solemnly put away the 10 purple gold coins floating in front of them. In the next second, the royal guards guarding the royal palace's entrance directly shouted at the soldiers at the entrance, "Quickly open the city gates." As soon as the royal guards finished speaking, the royal palace's gates slowly opened. It was only when the palace gates were completely opened that the royal guard captain bowed respectfully to Yi Chen and said, "Brother Yi Chen, I am honored to meet you. Lord Yu of Beech, the royal palace's gates are open. Please enter the royal palace." When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled slightly and asked, "Are there any restrictions on entering the royal palace?" Yi Chen had brought 2,000 soldiers to welcome the bride. Although the soldiers under his command did not bring any weapons, their status as soldiers was real. Logically speaking, Yi Chen should not have brought his soldiers into the royal palace. This was equivalent to disrespecting Lu Hong. It could even be said that it was akin to a rebellion. Yi Chen naturally knew this, but Yi Chen still asked this question. The reason was very simple. He wanted to test the reaction of the royal guards guarding the royal palace's entrance. Why did he want to test their reaction? The reason was very simple. He wanted to find out how likely it was to subdue the royal guards. The reason why Yi Chen wanted to subdue the royal guards was very simple. None of the royal guards' physical aptitude was lower than Class A. If they were subdued, these royal guards, with the support of the characteristics of the reincarnation immortal city, would all become level SSS or even surpass level SSS aptitude. F, D, C, or B rank soldiers couldn't compare to such a soldier. It was precisely because of this that Yi Chen directly had the idea of subduing the royal guards after noticing that their aptitudes were very high. It was also because of this idea that Yi Chen deliberately asked the royal guards if there were any restrictions on entering the royal palace in front of all the royal guards at the city gate, even though he knew that he could not bring his soldiers into the royal palace. As soon as Yi Chen finished his words, the royal guards could not help but be stunned, but they immediately came to their senses. The next second, the royal guards bowed to him without hesitation and said, "Your Excellency Yu of Beech, today is your wedding day. Of course, there are no restrictions." At this point, the captain of the Imperial Guards smiled and bowed in a loud voice. "Welcome to the royal palace, Your Excellency Yu of Beech." After the royal guards finished speaking, the royal guards made a gesture of inviting Yi Chen to enter the royal palace. At this time, the royal guards near the city gate looked at each other and then bowed to Yi Chen in unison. "Welcome to the royal palace, Your Excellency Yu of Beech." Chapter 857. Yi Chen couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he heard the words of the Imperial Guards guarding the gate of the Imperial Palace. It was almost certain, when Dongda, the idiot, began to cause chaos in the world, He could directly take action and get all the soldiers of the Imperial Guards in his hands. Thinking of this, Yi Chen couldn't help but smile. Then he raised his hand and shouted, "You all wait here. The rest of you, follow me into the Imperial Palace." "Yes, my lord." Zhao Yun, Dian Xiong, Guo Yi, Guan Er, Zhang San, Gao Shun, Zhang Liao, and the other civil and military officials, as well as the 2,000 soldiers of Samsara City, heard this and bowed loudly in unison. The captain of the Imperial Guards and the surrounding soldiers were stunned when they heard this, and then their faces all changed. They didn't feel like they had been fooled, but they felt like they had failed Yi Chen's test. They couldn't be blamed for thinking this way. After all, Yi Chen had just asked the captain of the Imperial Guards if there were any restrictions on entering the Imperial Palace. The captain of the Imperial Guards directly said that there were no restrictions. But now, Yi Chen directly asked his soldiers to stay outside the Imperial Palace. What did this mean? Wasn't it because Yi Chen knew the restrictions on entering the Imperial Palace? And Yi Chen clearly knew the restrictions on entering the Imperial Palace, but he pretended not to know and deliberately asked. What did this mean? Was he fooling them? That was nonsense. If Yi Chen, Yu of Beach of the Great Han Empire, wanted to fool them, he wouldn't have given them a reward of 10 purple gold coins in the first place. If it wasn't a trick, then what was it? It was very simple. It was a test. To be more precise, in the eyes of the Imperial Guards at the gate of the Imperial Palace, Yi Chen, Yu of Beach of the Great Han Empire, wanted to subdue them. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done such a troublesome thing. But they clearly knew the restrictions on entering the Imperial Palace, but they pretended not to know. This was a big taboo in the army, because it meant that they were not loyal enough. And how could they, as members of the Imperial Guards, not know what the generals and nobles would think of soldiers who were not loyal? And it was precisely because they knew it that their faces changed. This was because they had lost the opportunity to follow Ghost King Yi Chen, who was currently at the peak of his power in the Great Han Empire. Yi Chen glanced at the royal guards whose expressions changed drastically. He smiled slightly and said, "That's right. You don't need to think too much. This king is very satisfied with your attitude." Yi Chen naturally did not like disloyal subordinate. However, this did not hinder Yi Chen's thoughts of subduing the royal guards. The reason was simple. The Imperial's loyalty had est. Ss versus S's this the S's this the S's. The S great USS great Han emperors imperial dynasty great of the great Han dynasty. If not for the fact that the Great Han Empire was still around and Lu Hong was still the emperor of the Great Han Empire, the entire Imperial Guards would have changed. Under such circumstances, even if the Imperial Guards were not inclined to follow Yi Chen, they would still choose to follow someone else. For example, they would follow Dongdo when he brought disaster to the world, just like what was recorded in history. And it was precisely because of this that Yi Chen would not mind the disloyalty of the Imperial Guards at the gate of the Imperial Palace. As for the possibility that the Imperial Guards would be disloyal to Yi Chen like they were now, it was impossible for them to appear. Because Yi Chen was the son of Providence, who walked the path of plundering the providence of the Imperial Palace. He had great providence, and it was getting stronger and stronger. With this, even if Yi Chen did not manage the soldiers, they would still be 100% loyal to Yi Chen. In addition, with the support of various attributes and characteristics of the reincarnation Immortal City, the soldiers would not betray Yi Chen, let alone do anything disloyal. As soon as Yi Chen finished his words, the Imperial Guards guarding the gate of the Imperial Palace and the captain of the Imperial Guards were stunned. Then, their eyes lit up. In the next second, the captain of the Imperial Guards and his subordinates bowed to Yi Chen and said loudly, "Thank you, Lord Yu of Beach, for your appreciation." Although Yi Chen did not say it explicitly, the captain of the Imperial Guards and his subordinates were not stupid. They naturally understood the meaning of Yi Chen's words. And it was precisely because they understood the meaning of Yi Chen's words that they were so excited and excited. After hearing the words of the imperial guards at the gate of the imperial palace, Yi Chen nodded with a smile and then shouted, "Let's go to the imperial palace." As soon as Yi Chen finished his words, the groom's escort team set off directly and headed for the imperial palace. As for Yi Chen's subordinates, they all stayed behind. The imperial palace was different from other places. Only the imperial guards could enter it. If Yi Chen's subordinates all went in, it would be a rebellion. Yi Chen's subordinates were very clear about this. Although they were not afraid, they would not do so, because they were very clear about one thing. It was not the time for a rebellion. The classical music of the groom's escort was still playing. Yi Chen rode the Pegasus Goldie and slowly entered the gate of the imperial palace. The moment Yi Chen arrived at the gate of the imperial palace, hundreds of light pillars suddenly appeared from the backyard of the imperial palace. Yi Chen, whose divine senses had been covering the whole Luoyang, suddenly opened his eyes when he saw this. "How dare you?" Thinking of this, Yi Chen's thoughts moved. The pitch-black Godslayer instantly appeared and then disappeared in a flash. In the backyard of the imperial palace, outside the residence of the imperial palace's Princess Daqiao and Princess Changel, several hundred black-clothed and masked players suddenly appeared. In the next second, a loud shout came from the mouth of one of the black-clothed players. "Attack!" As soon as his words fell, the players who had hidden in the imperial palace at some point in time all took out a jade talisman. When the maids guarding the entrance saw this, they were all stunned. Then they all screamed, "Assassins! Assassins! Quickly come and catch the assassins!" Just as the maids finished speaking, a black light flashed. Then, the sound of bodies being pierced rang out. Poochie, 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 in the blink of an eye, the several hundred players who had just taken out their jade talismans were stabbed to death by the Godslayer. As for their souls, without exception, they were all devoured by the Godslayer. In the next second, the sound of incomparably dense explosions rang out. Boom, boom, boom. The corpses of the several hundred players who had just been killed by the Godslayer were all instantly ignited and burned into nothingness. On the wedding day, blood should not be spilled. This was true. However, Yi Chen, who was already enraged, did not care about this. If he did not directly kill these players, Yi Chen was certain that Daqiao and Xiaoqiao would be instantly killed on the spot. Moreover, they would be smashed to pieces. This was because these players who had suddenly come online from the imperial palace were all holding divine talismans of annihilation. Chapter 858. Others might not know what the great annihilation talisman was, but how could Yi Chen, who had been reborn, not know? To be precise, as long as this thing was activated, it would directly annihilate everything in the explosion range. It could be said that the Great Annihilation Talisman contained the power to shatter space. If Yi Chen did not kill them directly, even if Yi Chen refined the origin of space, he would not be able to wipe out the space-shattering power that appeared after the Great Annihilation Talisman was activated. As for the reason, it was very simple. Yi Chen's realm was not high enough. Damn it, these bastards, they are sure that I won't leave anyone alive. Yi Chen was going to marry Daqiao and Xiaoqiao today, so it was impossible for him to ignore the safety of Daqiao and Xiaoqiao and purposely leave someone alive to investigate the mastermind behind this attack. The people behind the players that had been killed by Yi Chen must have thought of this, which was why they unscrupulously sent their underlings to plot against Yi Chen, or rather, to disgust Yi Chen. If they succeeded, Yi Chen would naturally lose Daqiao and Xiaoqiao. If they failed, Yi Chen would not be able to find out who did it. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's eyes narrowed, and a cold light flashed in them. If it was in the past, I would have no choice but to use the most time-consuming method, which was to use my divine sense to monitor all the players in the Three Kingdoms game area and find out who did it. Things are different now. I don't only have that one method now, Yi Chen thought. When Yi Chen had returned to the real world, he had enslaved members of two hidden forces. Of course, these two hidden forces members had parasitic soul bodies in their bodies. Otherwise, Yi Chen would not have bothered to enslave them. However, this was not important. What was important was that these two hidden forces members with parasitic soul bodies might know who the mastermind behind this attack on Yi Chen was. As for the reason, it was very simple. There were more or less connections between the hidden forces. It could be said that apart from important secrets, the hidden forces would pass on or communicate with each other. Therefore, the two slaves that Yi Chen had subdued might know who had used the Great Annihilation Talisman. This was similar to how the Gongsun clan, who possessed the geomagnetic lightning bomb, did not hide the news of the geomagnetic lightning bomb and was known by the Nangong clan. Even if Yi Chen subdued two hidden forces members with parasitic soul bodies, did not know who had attacked Yi Chen, it did not matter. This was because Yi Chen, of course, he could use his divine sense to monitor the entire Three Kingdoms newbie zone. Although this would waste Yi Chen's time, the possibility of Yi Chen finding the truth was not low. The Great Annihilation Technique, Secret, the Secret Realms Newbie Talisman. The Secret Annihilation Great Annihilation Realm Newbie? At the same time, Yi Chen used the slave contract in the ancient contract book to sense the two members of the hidden forces that he had subdued in the real world. In the next second, Yi Chen's mind moved as he sent a voice transmission. Which clan has the Great Annihilation Talisman? The moment Yi Chen's thought appeared, the two hidden forces members that Yi Chen had subdued through the ancient contract book were both stunned. They hurriedly stopped what they were doing and bowed in Yi Chen's direction. Master, the clans that have the Great Annihilation Talisman are the Luoyang cities Wang clan and the Xunqing cities Lu clan. Although the two of them were not in the same position, their words were surprisingly identical. Hearing this, Yi Chen couldn't help but frown, and then asked through voice transmission. He sent a voice transmission and asked, "Which of these two clans attacked me?" Yi Chen frowned. It wasn't because he couldn't determine which clan had attacked him, but because the Luoyang cities Wang clan and the Xunqing cities Lu clan had never appeared in Yi Chen's previous life. But now Yi Chen heard news about the Luoyang cities Wang clan and the Xunqing cities Lu clan. This result naturally left Yi Chen somewhat puzzled. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't have frowned. As for Yi Chen's question about which clan had attacked him, it was also to confirm who his enemy was. It must be known that no matter how cold, heartless, or cruel Yi Chen was, he wouldn't kill indiscriminately. Of course, if he couldn't confirm it, Yi Chen didn't mind paying a visit to the two clans. As soon as Yi Chen asked this question, the two slaves were stunned. They knew very well how powerful and abnormal their master, Yi Chen, was. In their opinion, in the real world, no one would dare to attack Yi Chen. But in the end, the tyrannical and despair-inducing Yi Chen had encountered an attack. Moreover, it was an attack from the Great Annihilation Talisman. How could they not be stunned? After coming back to their senses, the two slaves hurriedly bowed in Yi Chen's direction. "Master, I'll go and ask now. It won't take long." "Master, I'll also go and ask. It won't take long." As soon as the two slaves answered, Yi Chen's brows furrowed again. "There's no possibility of the two of them deceiving me, and they wouldn't dare to deceive me. In other words, it could be the Luoyang cities Wang clan or the Xunqing cities Lu clan that attacked me, or both clans. No, something isn't right, no matter if it's a normal player, or a large or small faction, or even a hidden faction, it's impossible that they don't know the consequences of angering me." Just as Yi Chen thought of this, his divine sense that covered the entire Great Han Empire suddenly heard something that wasn't normal. "The plan has succeeded. Tell everyone to log off. Also, no one is to mention that person's name, and no one is to mention anything related to the plan." Hearing this, Yi Chen, who was still thinking, suddenly opened his eyes. Then, his right hand reached into the air. In that instant, The space in front of Yi Chen's right hand suddenly distorted. Then, Yi Chen's right hand directly reached in. At the same time, in a luxurious private room on the second floor of a restaurant in Yangzhou City, the space suddenly distorted. In the next second, a palm appeared out of thin air. Then, it tapped the air twice. Wung wung. Two violent sounds of air being torn apart instantly sounded. At the same time, an incomparably anxious cry sounded out. Not good. Quickly log off. No. Quickly kill yourself. The instant the cry sounded out, two bangs sounded out. Then, the two men in the luxurious private room instantly fainted. Yi Chen, whose divine sense had locked onto this place, coldly smiled when he saw this. His right hand made a suction force and instantly pulled the two unconscious men to his right hand. Then, the two men in the luxurious private room instantly disappeared without a trace. Chapter 859. Looking at the two unconscious players who had been caught in the pocket dimension, Yi Chen curled his lips in disdain. You want to scheme against me? You think too much. Before catching these two men, Yi Chen still had some doubts about whether someone wanted to use him to deal with the Wang clan of Luo City and the Lu clan of Shin City. But now Yi Chen could confirm this point. Because of what one of the two captured players had said in the private room of the restaurant, and also because after seeing Yi Chen's right hand, their expressions had changed drastically and they had wanted to go offline immediately. When he reached De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, he would go offline, find that bastard, and kill him. Towards his enemies, Yi Chen's principle from the beginning to the end was to exterminate them. However, Yi Chen was now fetching the bride, so he couldn't go offline casually. Otherwise, Yi Chen would immediately go offline to investigate the mastermind behind this palace incident. Just as Yi Chen thought of this, the voices of the two slaves of the hidden families were transmitted to Yi Chen's mind. Master, I just asked a lot of people. The Wang clan of Luo City and the Lu clan of Shin City didn't do anything to you. However, only these two families have the Great Annihilation Talisman. Master, the information I obtained here is that the Luo City's Wang clan and the Shin City's Lu clan have both sold some Great Annihilation Divine Talismans. As for who bought them, I haven't found out yet. After hearing the two slaves' reports, Yi Chen narrowed his eyes and a cold light flashed across them. He had to make a trip to the Wang clan of Luo City and the Lu clan of Shin City. If they dared to act up, he would kill them all. The two slaves' answers couldn't prove that the Wang clan of Luo City and the Lu clan of Shin City were involved in this palace incident. But was this important? Of course not. Blame it on the fact that the Great Annihilation Divine Talisman came from the Wang clan of Luo City and the Lu clan of Shin City. Furthermore, it was used on Yi Chen. As for why Yi Chen went to the two clans, it was very simple. He was going to take away all the Great Annihilation Talismans and collect some interest along the way. Of course, Yi Chen would not skip the interrogation step, because it was still impossible to make a 100% judgment as to whether or not the two families were involved in this incident in the palace. Thinking of this, Yi Chen transmitted a message to the two slaves through the slave contract. Work hard in your cultivation. Soon, I will have a mission for you. The mission that Yi Chen was talking about was actually the crazy plan to devour the stars that had been set up beforehand. To be more precise, it was to let the parasitic soul inside the slave evolve into a crystallizer. Then, the slave would be sent into space to devour the endless planets in space. In this way, Yi Chen would be able to obtain an endless supply of supertonic pills and use them to increase the strength of himself and his army. And in order to start this plan, he had to make the two slaves work hard in their cultivation. Otherwise, Yi Chen would not have said this. Of course, in order to complete the crazy plan to devour the stars, Yi Chen would have to subdue a sufficient number of parasitic soul bodies. After all, Yi Chen's army would grow larger and larger in the future. 2 parasitic soul bodies would not be able to support the consumption of the soldiers. Upon hearing Yi Chen's words, the two slaves hurriedly bowed in Yi Chen's direction. Yes, master. Yi Chen nodded in satisfaction and cut off the connection. Using his consciousness, he looked directly at the palace where Big Qiao and Little Qiao were. At this moment, the hundreds of imperial guards that had been attracted by the maid's scream were all looking at the empty courtyard in confusion. Where are the assassins? After confirming that there were no assassins, one of the imperial guards heaved a sigh of relief. He then looked at the maid at the door and asked with an ashen face, All burned to death." The maid, whose eyes had widened in fright when she saw the assassins being burned to ashes in an instant, hurriedly said. The imperial guard's face turned even paler when he heard this. The next second, the imperial guard raised his right hand and shouted in a low voice, "Men, tie up this lowly maid for me." As soon as the royal guard captain finished speaking, two royal guards immediately stepped forward and prepared to capture the maid. When the maid saw this, she was so frightened that she fell to the ground with a thud. At this moment, the imperial guard suddenly thought of something and his face stiffened. He then hurriedly raised his hand and shouted in a low voice, "Stop!" The two imperial guards who had just arrived beside the imperial guard were stunned when they heard this and stopped in their tracks at the same time. Today is Yu of Beech's wedding day. It's not appropriate to see blood, and it's not appropriate to capture her. At this point, the imperial guard carefully glanced at the door of the main hall and said in a low voice, "The most important thing is that neither of the two princes nor the two princes are here. Most importantly, the two princesses haven't said anything yet, so we can't act on our own. Otherwise, the two princesses will definitely be displeased, and if the two princesses are displeased, Lord Ghost King will definitely be enraged." The two imperial guards trembled when they heard this and then hurriedly nodded in agreement. "Sir Captain is right. We can offend anyone, but we can't offend you of Beech." The imperial guard nodded when he heard this. He then looked directly at the maid who was so frightened that she sat on the ground and said in a low voice, "You're lucky. You're lucky that the two princesses didn't say anything, so I won't punish you. However, you better be alert. If you dare to talk nonsense again and scare the two princesses, don't blame me for being merciless." Yes, General. Thank you, General." The maid who was so frightened that she sat on the ground heaved a sigh of relief when she heard this and hurriedly bowed in a low voice. Yi Chen's divine sense was locked on this place. When he saw this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. From the looks of it, the possibility of subduing the imperial guards was quite high. Thinking of this, Yi Chen couldn't help but smile. He then looked directly at Big Qiao and Little Qiao, who didn't show any signs of fear from beginning to end. The two of them were very calm. Was it because they were naturally bold, or because they knew that he was here to escort the bride, so they weren't worried at all? It was probably the latter. Yi Chen thought so, not because Yi Chen was narcissistic, but because Big Qiao and Little Qiao didn't have any martial skills. Of course, the most important thing was that those assassins appeared too quickly. The imperial guards couldn't rush over in time. But even in such a situation, Big Qiao and Little Qiao still didn't show any fear or panic. What did this mean? Bold? That was possible, but it was more likely because of Yi Chen. To be precise, in Big Qiao and Little Qiao's hearts, Yi Chen, who was about to marry them, would definitely protect their safety. Otherwise, no matter how bold they were, they wouldn't have been so calm from beginning to end. Thinking of this, Yi Chen couldn't help but smile. At this moment, an ear-piercing greeting was suddenly heard. "Your servant, Shao 11Z, greets Lord Yu of Beech." When Yi Chen heard this, he glanced at the little eunuch who suddenly trotted over and nodded. "Why didn't you welcome me at the palace gates?" Chapter 860. Yi Chen's question sounded very normal, but the anger and killing intent in it was so strong that it could cause one to break down. As for the reason why Yi Chen was acting like this, he was naturally doing it on purpose. After all, Yi Chen was one of the eunuchs in the hearts of the eunuch. Yi Chen had already gone out to escort the bride, but not only did they not see a single eunuch, they also did not see a single eunuch when they arrived at the palace gates. If Yi Chen casually let this matter pass, then Yi Chen, you of Beach of the Great Han Empire, would be too cheap. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was that Yi Chen was very puzzled by the fact that no eunuch appeared. After all, this result was too abnormal. The moment Yi Chen finished speaking, the eunuch named Xiao Shizi immediately trembled and then knelt on the ground with a bang. You, Lord Yu of Beach, it's not that this servant did not go to welcome Lord Yu of Beach, but the first prince sent people to intercept Xiao Chuanzi and the others who were leaving the palace to welcome Lord Yu of Beach. This servant also discovered this matter and hurriedly came to welcome Lord Yu of Beach. When Yi Chen heard this, his eyes suddenly widened and a cold light flashed in them. Lu Bian actually dared to cause trouble, Empress, he ordered this, and it was that bastard He Jin, no matter who it was, he would deal with them all. Thinking of this, Yi Chen raised his right hand and pointed in the air. Kaboom! 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 3 thunderous roars resounded in an instant. At the same time, 3 bolts of lightning appeared out of nowhere and then separated. 2 of the bolts of lightning struck the palace, while the other one struck He Jin's residence. In the next second, Empress He, who was sitting with Emperor Lu Hong in the palace, and Lu Bian, who was also in the palace, were instantly struck by the lightning. Ah! 2 blood-curdling screams were heard. Then, Empress He and Lu Bian collapsed on their chairs. When Lu Hong, who was sitting on the throne with a face full of joy, saw this, his body suddenly stiffened, and then he said with a dull face, what's going on, Your Majesty? Could it be that the immortal divinity is enraged and sent down divine lightning to punish? Zhang Li stood next to Lu Hong, his eyes glittering. Then he looked at Lu Hong with a look of terror, and bowed deeply. Lu Hong, who was confused about why the Empress and Lu Bian had been struck by lightning, suddenly stood up when he heard this. He then shouted in shock, "What's wrong? Immortals are angry? Why?" Lu Hong was the emperor of the Great Han Empire. He claimed that his imperial power was bestowed by the heavens. He even called himself the true dragon son of heaven. However, when it came to immortals, Lu Hong was afraid from the bottom of his heart. No matter how noble Lu Hong's identity was, no matter how high his status was, he couldn't get rid of the identity of a mortal. And when a mortal faced an immortal divinity, there was no doubt that it would be reverence and fear. It was also because of this that Lu Hong was frightened when he heard Zhang Li say that immortals are angry. After hearing Lu Hong's panicked words, Zhang Li glanced at Empress He and Lu Bian, who were foaming at the mouth and trembling back and forth. Then, he bowed and said, "Your Majesty, I just heard that the first prince seems to have sent people to intercept the people who were going to welcome you of Beach." "What?" Lu Hong was stunned when he heard this, and then asked with a confused face. When Zhang Li heard this, he looked at Lu Bian with hesitation. Then, he bowed again and said, "Your Majesty, the first prince sent people to intercept the people who were going to welcome you of Beach. However, in my opinion, it was most likely because the first prince was bewitched by someone." "Father Rang, are you saying that this was ordered by my Empress He?" Lu Hong's face darkened when he heard this, and then he opened his mouth and asked. When Zhang Li heard this, he hurriedly bowed and said, "Your Majesty, I don't dare to make a judgment. It should be this damn bitch. Even if it isn't, it has a lot to do with her. Otherwise, why didn't the immortal divinity strike anyone else, but her?" Lu Hong was furious when he heard this, and then he roared fiercely. When Zhang Li heard Lu Hong's words, his eyes showed a hint of joy. Obviously, Zhang Li was using this as a pretext to make a fuss. He wanted to kill Empress He, and even if he couldn't kill her, he wanted to cripple her. As for the purpose, it was very simple. A Liu Bian with Empress He and a Liu Bian without Empress He were two completely different concepts. The former was difficult for Liu Bian to control and influence, while the latter was the complete opposite. To be more precise, Zhang Li was using his ultimate move, so that after Lu Hong died, he could continue to receive divine grace, and then continue to maintain his current glory and wealth. Just as Lu Hong was furious in He Jin's mansion in Luoyang, He Jin, who was originally sitting in the hall with a gloomy face, was struck by a bolt of lightning. He Jin, who had fainted, was rescued by a doctor amidst cries, and then he slowly opened his eyes. "Master, sob sob sob, you're finally awake, sob sob sob." He Jin's wife, Madame He, saw that He Jin had woken up and immediately cried bitterly. He Jin, who had just opened his eyes, suddenly thought of something, and then he hurriedly shouted, "Quick! Prepare the horse, I want to enter the palace." Although He Jin shouted, his voice was not only hoarse but also very low. He Jin's wife, Madame He, was very close to He Jin, so she naturally heard He Jin's words. After being slightly stunned, she hurriedly asked, "Master, your body is very weak right now, you can't go out." Madame He naturally had good intentions, but before she could finish speaking, she was interrupted by the suddenly irritable He Jin. "Don't ruin my plans. Quickly prepare the horse, or it will be too late." He Jin's voice was still hoarse and very low, but it was still heard by Madame He. At this moment, He Jin's wife, Madame He, suddenly trembled. Then she hurriedly looked at the door and shouted, "What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for death? Quickly prepare the horse." "Yes, madam." When the servant waiting at the door heard this, he immediately recovered from the shock of, He Jin was struck by lightning but didn't die, and hurriedly bowed. After he finished speaking, he hurriedly ran towards the stable. At this moment, He Jin struggled and wanted to get up, but he found that he was powerless and could not get up at all. He immediately panicked. "Master, I'll help you up." When He Jin's wife saw this, she hurriedly went forward and helped He Jin sit up. "I can't ride the horse, go prepare the carriage, it has to be fast." He Jin, who was leaning on Madame He, glanced in the direction of the palace, and then said in a low voice. When Madame He heard this, she hurriedly nodded, then looked at the servant girl beside her and said, "Go prepare the carriage immediately." "Yes, madam." When the servant girl heard this, she hurriedly bowed and hurriedly ran out. When Madame He saw the servant girl leave, she looked at He Jin and then asked with a face full of worry, "Master, did something happen in the palace?" Chapter 861. It's not that something has happened, it's something big. I shouldn't have said those words to Yen. I hope it's not too late. Otherwise, my He clan, I'm afraid. After He Jin heard Madame He's words, there was a strong sense of regret in his eyes. Then, he suppressed his emotions and said. When Madame He heard this, she was shocked and hurriedly asked, "Master, what did you say to the first prince?" When He Jin heard this, he glared at Madame He and said in a deep voice, "That's not something you should ask. Hurry up and get someone to carry me out. I need to enter the palace immediately. Otherwise, it'll be too late." When Madame He heard this, her face immediately paled, and she said seriously, "Master, no matter what happens, this concubine will not leave you. This concubine is your woman in life and will be your ghost in death." After Madame He finished speaking, she shouted at the door, "4 people, come and carry Master out." As soon as Madame He's words fell, 4 nimble servants hurriedly walked in and carried He Jin out of the door. Luoyang, Imperial Palace. Yi Chen, whose divine sense covered all of Luoyang, glanced at the Imperial Palace before looking at the He residence and He Jin, who was being carried out by the servants. So it was that old bastard He Jin who did it. If it wasn't for that bastard, I would have struck that bastard to death with a bolt of lightning. He Jin was Zhang Li's eunuch. He was the key to luring Dongda into Luoyang. Without He Jin's provocation, Dongda could only hide in Liangzhou and not come to Luoyang openly. If Dongda didn't come to Luoyang, the Dongda rebellion wouldn't exist. If the Dongda rebellion didn't start, then wouldn't Yi Chen have waited for so long in vain? It was also because of this that Yi Chen didn't kill He Jin directly. Empress He, that slut, and Lu Bian, that trash, couldn't die or be crippled. Otherwise, the chaos caused by Dongda could very well have been reversed. Empress He and Lu Bian were the key to provoking Dongda and making him lose his mind. If the two of them died, the historical plot of Dongda's rebellion would also be affected. Yi Chen naturally did not want to see such an outcome. Otherwise, when Yi Chen had used lightning to punish the He siblings and Lu Bian, he had directly killed them. How could he have allowed them to continue living? I'll let you off for now. If you still want to go against me, I'll let you have a taste of the lightning massage set meal. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's mind moved and a breeze instantly appeared in He Jin's mansion. Then, it directly blew past He Jin, who was being carried by 4 servants. In the next second, He Jin, who was originally somewhat dispirited, suddenly froze. Then, with a carp flip, he directly stood on the ground. He Jin clenched his fists and kicked his legs. After confirming that his body had really recovered, he was overjoyed and then knelt on the ground with a bang. In the next second, He Jin solemnly bowed 3 times to the sky. Thank you, immortals, for your kindness. I swear that after I'm done with my personal affairs, I'll offer you the heaviest offerings to thank you. As soon as He Jin's words fell, the servant who had received the order to lead the horse came over with a precious horse. When He Jin saw this, he immediately stood up and went directly to the side of the precious horse. He flipped over and mounted the horse. In the next second, He Jin directly raised the horse's whip that he had received from the servant and ruthlessly whipped the horse's butt. Nay! The precious horse instantly neighed. Then, He Jin rode out of the He mansion and galloped rapidly towards the palace. Luoyang Palace Hall. Lu Hong paced around with an ashen face. After a while, he stopped and was stunned. In the next second, Lu Hong looked at Zhang Li with a puzzled expression and asked, "Father, did you hear that? Even if Bien was a little mischievous, it shouldn't have angered the immortals, right?" "Your Majesty, the immortals naturally wouldn't care about ordinary mischief. However, Lord Yu of Beach is different. He is an immortal from the heavens who was specially sent down to help your Majesty." When Zhang Li heard this, his expression changed slightly and he hurriedly bowed. When Lu Hong heard this, he was stunned. After he came to his senses, the anxiety that he had felt due to the sudden arrival of lightning instantly disappeared. In the next second, Lu Hong said excitedly, "Oh, right. How could I have forgotten this? I am the true dragon, the son of heaven. I am blessed by the heavens. It is impossible for the immortals to strike me with lightning." It was obvious that the root cause of Lu Hong's anger and suspicion was not because of Lu Bian's mischief, but because of the sudden appearance of the immortals' anger. To be more precise, Lu Hong was worried that the immortals in the heavens would also strike him with lightning. And now, after Zhang Li's explanation, Lu Hong's worry naturally disappeared and he became excited. After a few breaths, Lu Hong regained his composure. He then looked at Zhang Li and said in a low voice, "Let Father write a decree. The Empress is disrespectful to the immortals and failed to educate her son properly. She is to be removed from her position as Empress and banished to the cold palace. Without our orders, no one is to visit her." Speaking of this, Lu Hong glanced at Lu Bian, who was still trembling, and then continued, "The first prince, Lu Bian, is young and mischievous. He does not understand the importance of seniority and is disrespectful to the immortals. He is to be removed from his position as prince and demoted to a commoner. He is to be exiled 3,000 li." When Zhang Li heard this, the ecstasy that had just appeared instantly disappeared and was instead replaced by shock. In the next second, Zhang Li hurriedly bowed to Lu Hong. Your Majesty, the first prince is young and ignorant. His actions were all due to the bewitchment of others. Moreover, the immortals in the heavens have already punished him. Your Majesty only needs to punish him slightly. There is no need to make such a big fuss. The Great Han Empire only had 2 princes in total. One was Lu Bian and the other was Lu Xie. Zhang Li could still get along with the former. As for the latter, Lu Xie, Zhang Li did not get along with him at all. If Lu Hong was allowed to punish Lu Bian, then Lu Bian would completely lose his right to the throne. If that happened, Zhang Li's interests would definitely be affected. Naturally, Zhang Li did not want to see such a result. Otherwise, he would not have hurriedly pleaded for leniency after hearing Lu Hong's words. In truth, even Zhang Li himself did not expect that Lu Hong would ignore the hint that Lu Bian was bewitched by others to commit such atrocities. To be more precise, Zhang Li originally wanted Lu Hong to only punish Empress He. Who would have thought that Lu Hong would not only punish Empress He, but also punish Lu Bian? When Zhang Li finished speaking, Lu Hong immediately frowned. When Zhang Li saw this, his expression immediately changed. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Your Majesty, the first prince was struck by lightning, but he did not lose his life. This means that the immortals are not truly angry. This also means that the first prince is the crown prince of the Great Han Empire. Otherwise, the first prince might." When Lu Hong heard this, he was stunned. He looked at Zhang Li with a confused expression and asked, "Father Rang, is this true? This servant does not dare to speak nonsense. However, according to this servant's judgment, this matter is most likely true." When Zhang Li heard this, a trace of unwillingness flashed in his eyes. He then bowed to Lu Hong. When Lu Hong heard this, he nodded and said, "Pass on my decree. 3 years of the Empress's palace silver will be deducted, and Lu Bian will be the crown prince of the Great Han Empire. As for Yi Chen, if he asks, I will leave the explanation to Father Rang. In short, we cannot make him unhappy." Chapter 862. Yes, Your Majesty. When Zhang Li heard this, he quickly bowed and said, Zhang Ran wanted to kill Empress He, but unfortunately, his ultimate move was ineffective in front of the immortal's wrath. Although Zhang Li was extremely unreconciled, he did not dare to continue to cause trouble in this matter. Yi Chen, who had been covering Luoyang with his divine sense, saw this and immediately gave up on the idea of knocking Lu Hong out. No matter if it was Lu Bian or Empress He, they could not be demoted at this moment. If Lu Hong really wanted to remove Empress He and Lu Bian, Yi Chen could only use the immortal's wrath to strike Lu Hong and instill fear in him. Then, he would withdraw the order to remove Empress He and Lu Bian from their positions. Of course, this was before. Now, Yi Chen did not have to do anything. Damn it. Fortunately, that damn eunuch Zhang Li did not succeed. Otherwise, I would have to do something to stop him. But speaking of which, He Jin, that old bastard, did this to take revenge on me. It was a stroke of luck that allowed Lu Bian, that little bastard, to become the crown prince in advance in history. Lu Bian did not become the crown prince at this time. Otherwise, Yi Chen would not think this way. Thinking of this, Yi Chen looked directly at the little eunuch who was kneeling on the ground and trembling in fear. You're not bad. Take this. After Yi Chen finished speaking, he waved his right hand and a golden brick appeared instantly. Then, he went straight to the little eunuch named Xiao 11Z. Xiao 11Z, who was terrified because of Yi Chen's wrath, was stunned when he heard this. Originally, he thought that this time, he would be severely punished by Yi Chen, Yu of Beech of the Great Han Empire. He might even be killed by Yi Chen. After all, no one came to greet him was an ironclad fact. No matter what the reason was, the result was that Yi Chen, the #1 prince of the Great Han Empire, lost face. Therefore, even if Yi Chen wanted to kill someone, the possibility of him being killed was very high. Who would have thought that this was not the case at all? Not only did Yi Chen not punish him, he even rewarded him heavily with a golden brick. This was beyond the little eunuch's expectations. After coming back to his senses, the little eunuch named Shao 11Z immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he kowtowed to Yi Chen a few times. "You of Beech, your highness! This servant wishes you of Beech a happy marriage, and may you of Beech have a happy marriage, and may you live a long life." When Yi Chen heard the words of the little eunuch named Shao 11Z, he chuckled and nodded his head. "Lead the way." "Yes. This you immortal servant." Shao 11Z hastily bowed. Then, he put away the golden brick in front of him and walked toward the palace where De Qiao and Xiao Qiao were. With the little eunuch leading the way, the bridal procession finally had a direction. Then, they followed the little eunuch and walked forward while blowing on the wind. Yi Chen, who was riding on the Pegasus Shao Jin's back, glanced at the palace gates behind him and sneered. That old bastard, He Jin, had reached the city gates. He Jin had instigated Lu Bian to make things difficult for Yi Chen's little eunuch in order to take revenge on Yi Chen. If not for Yi Chen's lightning bolt, He Jin might have continued to sink deep into his hatred for Yi Chen and thought that he had taken revenge on Yi Chen. Of course, He Jin had already realized what had happened. Otherwise, He Jin wouldn't have been in such a hurry to enter the palace. Dong Da's chaos hadn't started yet. That old bastard couldn't die yet. Thinking of this, Yi Chen waved his right hand. A gust of wind suddenly appeared and swept toward the palace gates. In the blink of an eye, it swept He Jin, who had reached the city gates, up and flew toward the He residence. At this moment, a scream rang out from the sky. Save me. The palace guards on duty at the palace gates all widened their eyes when they saw this. General, just now, was that great General He Jin? A soldier rubbed his eyes in disbelief and pointed at He Jin, who had been swept away by the wind, and asked. The captain of the palace guards nodded and said, "It's him." "It's him? Did the great general offend a deity? Why was he suddenly swept away by the wind?" A soldier looked at He Jin, who was flying farther and farther away, and suddenly thought of something and shouted in shock. "Offend a deity? That's impossible, right?" "How is it impossible? Don't forget, He Jin has sued you of Beech several times. You're saying that you of Beech is a deity? That can't be right. Are you stupid? Think carefully, who was the one who destroyed the demon race that swept the world? If that's the case, you of Beech might really be a deity. What do you mean by might? It's true. That's right, I think so too. Otherwise, why would the divine beast Vermilion Bird and the divine beast White Tiger wait until you of Beech led the army to Luoyang before appearing? That bastard He Jin, how dare he frame you of Beech? Throw him to death. That's right, throw him to death. When the captain of the palace guards heard this, he immediately recovered from his shock. After carefully looking around, he looked at the soldiers under him and scolded in a low voice, "No matter how much that old bastard He Jin deserves to die, it's not something you can discuss. All of you, shut up. Be careful of your words." As soon as the captain of the palace guards finished speaking, the palace guards who were in charge of guarding the palace gates all came back to their senses and shut their mouths at the same time. He Jin was a great general. Even though he had been punished by Lu Hong several times, he was still a great general. Moreover, he was the elder brother of Empress He and the uncle of the first prince, Lu Bian. He was not someone they could discuss. Because they were shocked, they subconsciously talked about it. Now that their general had reminded them, they did not dare to continue talking about it. Just as the palace guards at the palace gates stopped talking, He Jin, who had been swept away by the strong wind, arrived above the He residence. Then, he saw the strong wind disappear without a trace. He Jin, who had been swept up by the strong wind, fell to the ground instantly with a face full of fear. Noticing this, He Jin's eyes immediately widened. Then, he let out an extremely terrified shriek. "My life is over!" Bang! A loud sound was heard. He-Jin, who was riding on a warhorse, fell to the ground directly, causing the ground to tremble. At the same time, a crisp sound was heard. Then, He-Jin let out an extremely mournful cry. Ouch! He-Jin did not fall to his death. The one who fell to his death was the warhorse that He-Jin was riding. However, He-Jin did not fare any better. This was because not only was his right leg broken, but his white bones were also exposed. In the palace, Yi-Chen, whose divine sense had enveloped the entire Luoyang, curled his lips in disdain when he saw He-Jin's miserable appearance. "This is the price I have to pay for saving your life. Take it well." Chapter 863. Zhang Li wanted to get rid of Empress He and He-Jin. If Yi-Chen didn't care about He-Jin and allowed him to enter the palace, then Zhang Li could use this opportunity to kill He-Jin. Moreover, there was a high chance of success. If He-Jin didn't die, then it wouldn't be a big deal. However, if He-Jin was killed by Zhang Li's scheme, then Dong Da's chaos wouldn't start. This result wasn't what Yi-Chen wanted to see. It was also because of this reason that Yi-Chen was willing to disregard the past and save He-Jin. Of course, the cost of Yi-Chen's help was He-Jin's lackey. Calculating the time, when the world war ends, Dong Da's chaos will start. At that time, He-Jin, Empress He, and Liu Bian will all be killed by Zhang Li and Dong Da. Moreover, they will die very miserably. Thinking of this, Yi-Chen couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then, he raised his right hand and grabbed at the air in the direction of Big Qiao and Little Qiao's palaces. In the next second, hundreds of jade talismans flew out from the courtyard of Big Qiao and Little Qiao's palaces and flew straight towards Yi-Chen. At this moment, the sun hadn't risen yet and the sky was still very dark. Moreover, Yi-Chen was at the back of the group, so no one noticed Yi-Chen's actions. Soon, hundreds of jade talismans flew through the air and disappeared without a trace. The jade talismans were naturally the divine annihilation talismans. They came from the players that Yi-Chen killed. If it was anything else, Yi-Chen wouldn't care. However, Yi-Chen couldn't ignore the divine annihilation talisman. After all, this was a very powerful item. If Yi-Chen didn't take it away, then the divine annihilation talisman might fall into the hands of Zhang Li and the other eunuchs. In that case, Dong Da's chaos and even the struggle for hegemony would change. As for the reason, it was very simple. The divine annihilation talisman wasn't only usable by players. The natives of the Three Kingdoms novice regions could also use it. If Zhang Li obtained the Great Annihilation Divine Talisman, then besides Yi-Chen, no one in this world would be able to contend against Zhang Li. In this way, what He-Jin, what Dong Da, what Duke, they were all trash. Zhang Li could kill them all with a Great Annihilation Divine Talisman. Yi-Chen did not want to see such an outcome. After glancing at the hundreds of Great Annihilation Talismans in his miniature world, Yi-Chen turned to look at the two unconscious players he had captured and brought into his miniature world. I wonder who the master behind these two bastards is. How dare they scheme against me? Thinking of this, Yi-Chen narrowed his eyes, a cold light flashing in them. The wedding procession continued forward and soon arrived at the palace where De Qiao and Xiao Qiao were. At this moment, the young eunuch who had led the way hastily arrived in front of Yi-Chen. He then bowed to Yi-Chen with incomparable flattery. "Lord Yu of Beach, we have arrived." After the young eunuch finished speaking, he took the initiative to kneel beside Little Gold's leg. He then placed his hands on the ground and quietly waited for Yi-Chen to dismount. When Yi-Chen saw this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He then dismounted from his horse and stepped on the young eunuch's back to land on the ground. After glancing at the large palace, Yi-Chen waved his right hand, and a golden brick appeared and flew to the young eunuch. "Thank you, Lord Yu of Beach, for your reward." When the young eunuch saw this, he immediately beamed with joy and loudly bowed. When Yi Chen heard this, he faintly smiled and walked into the palace. The moment Yi Chen walked through the palace gates, the maids, who had heard the music early in the morning, came to the courtyard and bowed to Yi Chen in unison as they loudly said, "Greetings, Lord Yu of Beech, for your humble servant." When Yi Chen heard this, he chuckled and nodded. Then, with a wave of his right hand, a pile of purple gold coins instantly appeared and landed at the feet of the maids. "This is for you." The maids, who were shocked by the purple gold coins and recovered from Yi Chen's words, were immediately overjoyed. They then excitedly bowed and loudly greeted Yi Chen. "Thank you, Lord Yu of Beech, for your reward." When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled and said, "I have something to say to the two consorts. Please do not enter and disturb us." When Yi Chen said this, he naturally wanted to go offline and hunt down the mastermind behind the palace assassination. If Yi Chen did not warn these maids, they would definitely follow him into the palace and discover the secret of Yi Chen's disappearance. What would happen after that? Without a doubt, the palace would be in chaos and chaos. Then, Lu Hong would label Yi Chen as a runaway. As for De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, explaining this to Yi Chen would not work. This was because Yi Chen had disappeared. No matter how they explained, it would be useless. Yi Chen did not want to go through the trouble of explaining this and that when he came back online. When the maids heard this, they were all stunned. Then, they hurriedly bowed and greeted. "Yes, Lord Yu of Beech." Although the maids could not understand Yi Chen's order, no one dared to question it. When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded in satisfaction and headed straight for the palace. When he arrived at the palace, Yi Chen immediately saw De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, who were sitting by the bed with red veils covering their heads. At this moment, two distinct body scents flew directly into Yi Chen's nostrils. So comfortable, when he thought of this, Yi Chen's eyes lit up. He did not expect that apart from their devastatingly beautiful faces and graceful figures, they also had such a special trait. When he thought of this, Yi Chen's lips curled up. At this moment, De Qiao and Xiao Qiao stood up and bowed to Yi Chen. "Greetings, my husband." De Qiao and Xiao Qiao's voices were crisp and pleasant, but they had a different tone. When Yi Chen heard this, his heart involuntarily swayed. "Damn, this is going to be enjoyable. Damn it, there's no hurry. Let's deal with the mastermind first." When he thought of this, Yi Chen immediately regained his composure. He then looked at De Qiao and Xiao Qiao and said with a smile, "I have some matters to attend to. I'll be back soon. You two don't need to panic." "Yes, my husband." When De Qiao and Xiao Qiao heard this, they were taken aback and nodded in unison. When Yi Chen heard this, he looked at De Qiao and Xiao Qiao apologetically. Then, with a thought, his primordial spirit entered the small world instantly. In the small world, once Yi Chen's primordial spirit entered, it immediately woke up the two players who were still unconscious. Just as the two players slowly opened their eyes, Yi Chen's primordial spirit waved its right hand, and the connate cardinal treasure, the Godslayer, appeared instantly. Who would have thought that? Before Yi Chen could ask, one of the players who had just opened his eyes narrowed his eyes and shouted, "What's wrong with you?" "Lord Yu of Beech, I was forced. It was young Master Zhang who made me do this. It really has nothing to do with me." "Idiot! You betrayed young Master Zhang, and Yi Chen will not let you off. This time, not only will you die, but your sister will also die because of you." When the other player heard this, his expression changed drastically, and he shouted sternly at the player who had confessed. Chapter 864. Yi Chen's primordial spirit stabbed the cursing player with the Godslayer in his right hand. The cursing player's heart was instantly pierced by the God-slaying spear, and he died on the spot. At the same time, the Godslayer flashed and devoured his soul. Yi Chen looked at the dead player and smiled coldly. Then, he looked at the player who confessed and said, "Tell me everything you know. Tell me everything you know. If you're not lying, I can give you a quick death." This player was the subordinate of the player who plotted against Yi Chen. Based on this, Yi Chen wouldn't let him go. The player's face turned pale when he heard this. Then, he screamed. "I've confessed. Why won't you let me go?" When Yi Chen heard this, he glanced at the player and stabbed with the god-slaying spear in his right hand. The thick, black god-slaying spear instantly pierced through the player's thigh bone with a poochie sound. The eyes of the player who had just screamed suddenly bulged out, and then he let out an extremely miserable howl. Ouch! This was the game world. That was true. However, the pain here was the same as in the real world. It was for this reason that the player let out such a miserable howl. Yi Chen looked at the pale and trembling player and said, "You can't go offline. You can't commit suicide. If you want to continue to enjoy this pain, I can let you continue to enjoy it until your body in the real world dies." Yi Chen's words were calm. However, they sounded different to the player's ears. Terrifying, evil, bone-chilling, and inhumane. The player's eyes bulged and he fainted at the thought of having to endure this pain for many days. When Yi Chen saw this, he coldly smiled. He slapped the air with his left hand, and the player who had fainted slowly woke up. "Devil! You're a devil!" The player who woke up looked at Yi Chen and shouted through gritted teeth. Yi Chen curled his lips in disdain. He stabbed the Godslayer in his right hand into the player's crotch. Poochie! A sound was heard. The Godslayer instantly pierced the player's crotch. In that instant, the player's eyes popped out, and he let out an extremely shrill scream. Ouch! Pain! It was very painful. The pain penetrated his bones and soul. That was what the player was feeling. It couldn't be helped. The feeling of having one's balls broken and one's root broken wasn't pleasant. Yi Chen looked at the player who was twisting and turning. He waved his left hand and an elixir appeared. It turned into powder and flew toward the player. In the blink of an eye, the player's screams stopped and he was stunned. At this moment, Yi Chen stabbed the Godslayer in his right hand into the player's crotch again. The player who didn't know what was going on because of his recovery instantly understood Yi Chen's intention. He shuddered. Ouch! The Godslayer pierced the player's crotch again. The player screamed in agony again. Ouch! Yi Chen raised his eyebrows when he saw this. He used his mind and another elixir appeared. It turned into powder and flew toward the player. In the next second, the player's screams stopped. "I'll talk! I'll talk!" The player, who had been tortured to the brink of insanity by Yi Chen's torture, shouted at Yi Chen with a terrified expression. He had no choice but to shout. If he didn't shout, Yi Chen would attack him again. He didn't want to beg Yi Chen to spare his life or hold on. He didn't want to say anything. At this moment, he didn't want to say anything. Because he only wanted to say one thing, and that was to say it quickly and have a good time. When Yi Chen heard this, he glanced at the player and said, "Don't worry. Say it." The player who had completely given up on resisting spoke, without hesitation. "I'm a cannon fodder for the Wang clan in Luo City. The person you killed is a subordinate of the Lu clan in Shunqing. His name is He San. Young Master Zhang is the young palace master of Wuji Palace. He found me through my sister and found He San through He San's father. Later, young Master Zhang gave me and He San a great annihilation talisman each and asked me to go to Yangzhou and monitor the Beauty Alliance." When the player said this, his eyes were filled with regret. Clearly, he regretted helping that so-called young Master Zhang. After clenching his fists, the player let out a long sigh and said, "If we didn't receive the order, we would go offline. If we received the order, we would use the Great Annihilation Talisman to attack the Beauty Alliance, and then go offline." Yi Chen narrowed his eyes when he heard this. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. So it was young Master Zhang. Young Master Zhang was the young palace master of Wuji Palace. His name was young Master Zhang. In Yi Chen's previous life, young Master Zhang had a very famous nickname, Young Master Ghost. If it were someone else, Yi Chen might have thought of the royal palace assassination as using someone else to do the dirty work, and disgusting Yi Chen. But young Master Zhang was the famous young Master Ghost in Yi Chen's previous life. If he was the one who did it, the royal palace assassination wouldn't be as simple as using someone else to do the dirty work or disgusting Yi Chen. The reason was simple. Young Master Zhang had a special treasure called the Glazed Soul Refining Bottle. Its function was to gather and refine souls. To be precise, it could gather the souls of the dead and refine them into puppet. Even the souls of natives were no exception. And in this royal palace assassination, young Master Zhang's real target was De Qiao and Xiao Qiao's souls, not Yi Chen. As for disgusting Yi Chen and using Yi Chen to get rid of the Wang clan of Luo City and the Lu clan of Xin City, it was just something he did in passing. This could be seen from the fact that young Master Zhang sent 2 people to keep an eye on the Beauty Alliance in Yangzhou. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that once the assassination of De Qiao and Xiao Qiao succeeded, the 2 players that young Master Zhang sent to Yangzhou would attack the Beauty Alliance and lure Yi Chen away. At first glance, it was hard to understand. After all, Yi Chen had nothing to do with the Beauty Alliance. But in reality, in the eyes of the players, the Beauty Alliance wasn't unrelated to Yi Chen. After all, Yi Chen had helped the Beauty Alliance several times. It was precisely because of this view that young Master Zhang, who wanted to get De Qiao and Xiao Qiao's souls, included the Beauty Alliance in his plan. To be more precise, young Master Zhang believed that after De Qiao and Xiao Qiao were killed, the Beauty Alliance would be attacked by the Great Annihilation Talisman, and they would definitely lure Yi Chen away. This way, he, young Master Zhang, could swagger away De Qiao and Xiao Qiao's souls. Of course, nothing was absolute. If the assassination of De Qiao and Xiao Qiao failed, young Master Zhang would give up on attacking the Beauty Alliance and pretend that nothing had happened. This way, no matter how furious Yi Chen was, he wouldn't go offline to investigate the matter during the wedding. As for whether Yi Chen would trace it back to him, young Master Zhang wasn't worried at all. This was because he had definitely taught the 2 players that Yi Chen had captured, and told them that if they fell into Yi Chen's hands, they would die. So, they didn't need to say anything. If these 2 players endured and didn't say anything, he, young Master Zhang, would give their families some benefit. This could be easily inferred from the cursing player and the words of the player who confessed to Yi Chen. Unfortunately, young Master Zhang was too arrogant. He thought that he could control people's hearts. In the end, of the 2 players he arranged, one believed in his words, while the other was so frightened by Yi Chen's terrifying past that he immediately begged for mercy and told the truth. This B***TCH really has guts. How dare he scheme against me? Just as Yi Chen thought of this, the player who had completely compromised suddenly showed extreme hatred in his eyes. In the next second he said, "Young Master Zhang, I think that I have a backup plan." Now it seems that young Master Zhang said that he had prepared a safe way out for me. It should be a lie. He will not let me go, nor will he let He-san go. We are chess pieces in his hands. When Yi Chen heard this, he glanced at the player and asked, "What do you think? Where is young Master Zhang?" "Magic City. My sister secretly told me," the disheartened player replied. Then, he thought of something and hurriedly looked at Yi Chen with a pleading expression. "Lord Yu of Beach, my sister is innocent. She's just a plaything in young Master Zhang's hands. If you go to Limitless Palace, please be magnanimous and let my sister live. Wang Chong, kneel down and thank you." When Yi Chen heard this, he glanced at Wang Chong and said, "If she's not dead and isn't a member of Limitless Palace, I'll consider it." "Thank you, Lord Yu of Beach." "Many thanks, Lord Ghost King." When Wang Chong heard this, he was immediately overjoyed. After which, he bowed and thanked Yi Chen. Hearing this, Yi Chen stabbed with the Godslayer in his right hand and killed Wang Chong on the spot. Was Wang Chong pitiful? A little. Was Wang Chong lamentable? A little. But what did this have to do with Yi Chen? To Yi Chen, Wang Chang was an enemy. Regardless of whether he did anything, he was an enemy because he participated in the royal palace assassination. If they were enemies, Yi Chen would only use one method to deal with them, and that was to kill them all. Chapter 865. Yi Chen glanced at Wang Chang's corpse, which had turned into specks of light and slowly disappeared. With a thought, his primordial spirit left the pocket world and returned to his body. In the next second, Yi Chen's eyes widened and a cold light flashed through them. Young Master Zhang should have gone offline in the palace. He had to leave someone here. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's thoughts moved and the space in front of him instantly distorted. In the next second, Zhao Yu and Chan Wan walked out of the distorted space. Husband! As soon as Zhao Yu and Chan Wan finished speaking, the bodies of De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, who were covered with red veils, stiffened. Yi Chen's primordial spirit covered the entire Luoyang. Naturally, De Qiao and Xiao Qiao's movements did not escape Yi Chen's senses. The two of them probably did not know that Zhao Yu, Chan Wan, Kai Mei'er Mi Zhen, Huang Wan and the 5 beautiful Zhen sisters, forget it, this matter. I'll leave it to Zhao Yu and Chan Wan to deal with. Yi Chen had many women, but De Qiao and Xiao Qiao did not know this. Otherwise, they would not have stiffened when they heard Zhao Yu and Chan Wan call Yi Chen husband. Of course, this was not important. What was important was that Yi Chen had to explain to De Qiao and Xiao Qiao. Originally, Yi Chen had planned to tell De Qiao and Xiao Qiao that he had many women after they were married. At that time, whether De Qiao and Xiao Qiao were willing to accept it or not, they would be Yi Chen's wives and could not leave Yi Chen. Of course, if De Qiao and Xiao Qiao really could not accept Yi Chen would not force them to do this and that. He would only raise them in the Copper Sparrow Pavilion. Although this was a little unkind, Yi Chen would not give up on De Qiao and Xiao Qiao because of guilt. As for the reason, it was very simple. Yi Chen liked beautiful women, and the Bronze Sparrow Pavilion in the Reincarnation Immortal City required a large number of beautiful women to be effective. As for De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, they were recognized by the system as super beauties. Yi Chen would never give up on De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, be it in terms of value or selfishness. If they didn't want to give up, they had to explain. Otherwise, De Qiao and Xiao Qiao would most likely be depressed for the rest of their lives. This was not the result that Yi Chen wanted to see. Of course, the current situation was that Yi Chen's plan had failed because of the palace assassination. Therefore, Yi Chen had to go offline immediately, chase after young Master Zhang, and destroy Limitless Palace. It was also because of this that the matter of explaining to De Qiao and Xiao Qiao could only be left to Zhao Yu and Chan Wan. Thinking of this, Yi Chen looked apologetically at De Qiao and Xiao Qiao before looking at Zhao Yu and Chan Wan. I'll leave this place to you. If any mutants appear here, don't hold back. Just kill them. Yes, husband. When Zhao Yu and Chan Wan heard this, they both nodded and replied. When Yi Chen heard this, he looked apologetically at Zhao Yu and Chan Wan. Then, with a thought, he went offline. The real world, Reincarnation City, City Lord's Mansion Hall. With a creak, the door of the diamond-grade gaming capsule slowly opened. Then Yi Chen stood up. Flaming Tiger Yilin, who noticed that Yi Chen had returned, was stunned. Then, she called out in a daze, "Big brother?" Yi Chen had just come online, and it wasn't long before he went offline. Naturally, it wasn't normal. Otherwise, Flaming Tiger Yilin wouldn't be in a daze. When Yi Chen heard Flaming Tiger Yilin's words, which were full of doubts, he sighed helplessly and said, "There are too many sluts. There are too many B***cheese. I still have to deal with them. You can continue cultivating." Yi Chen didn't want to go offline again and again, but he had no choice. One moment it was Liang Fulong, the next moment it was the Gongsun clan, and now it was young Master Zhang. Yi Chen couldn't let any of them go. Otherwise, if these enemies were given time, who knew where they would run off to? Yi Chen didn't want to see such an outcome. But then again, if these scumbags hadn't jumped out and provoked Yi Chen wouldn't have been able to obtain so many good items one after another. For example, the geomagnetic lightning bomb, the sun's true fire diagram, the fiery eyes of truth, the nine-tailed celestial fox, Tushan Daji, and the Black Emperor, the royal member of the Starry Sky Sword Dragon clan, and so on. It could be said that Yi Chen's harvest during this period was unbelievably bountiful, and the root cause was these players who provoked Yi Chen. Although Yi Chen felt a little helpless about this, he was also happy about it. It couldn't be helped. These idiots didn't stay put and accumulate strength. They couldn't hold back and directly jumped out to give Yi Chen a lot of good things. After hearing Yi Chen's words, the flaming tiger Yi Lin nodded and replied, "Yes, big brother." Hearing this, Yi Chen smiled slightly. Then, with a thought, he instantly released his divine sense and shrouded Shanghai in it in the blink of an eye. After a few breaths, Yi Chen's eyes suddenly opened. Found it. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's mind moved, and the space in front of him instantly distorted. After taking a look at the distorted space, Yi Chen took a step forward and disappeared. Southeast of Shanghai, at the gate of Wuji City near the sea. A young man looked at the cloudless sky with a gloomy face, then looked at the two men beside him who were dressed like attendants and asked, "Wang Chang, is there still no news from He-san?" Reporting to young palace master, "There isn't any news for the time being." When the slightly plump man heard this, he hurriedly bowed and said. When the young man heard this, his originally gloomy face became even gloomier. "Is there any news from the people who are watching the palace?" Reporting to young palace master, "Yi Chen hasn't left the palace yet." When the slightly plump attendant heard this, he hurriedly bowed and replied. When the young man heard this, his face became even more gloomy. "He hasn't left the palace. Why hasn't he left? Why hasn't he left? Young palace master, should we set off now and capture the person who looks like you?" After hearing the young man's words, the slightly thin man glanced at the northwest, then looked at the young man and bowed. When the young man heard this, he let out a long sigh, then looked at the slightly thin attendant and said, "This time, I'll let it go. If you act on your own next time, it's useless even if you're my cousin. Do you understand? Thank you for sparing my life, young palace master." When the slightly thin man heard this, his body suddenly stiffened, then he hurriedly bowed and said loudly. When the young man heard this, he curled his lips in disdain and then said, "If you want to put on a show, you have to go all the way. Don't leave any flaws. Let's go and capture that kid." As soon as the young man finished speaking, the space in the sky suddenly distorted, and then Yi Chen took a step forward and appeared here in an instant. The two attendants who were about to respond to the young man suddenly saw the shadow on the ground. After being stunned, they looked up at the sky at the same time. In the next second, two exclamations sounded at the same time. Yi Chen. Chapter 866. As soon as the two exclaimed, the young man who was addressed as young palace master immediately took out a stack of jade talismans. Great Annihilation Divine Talisman, Yi Chen, who had just appeared in the sky, smiled coldly when he saw this. He then raised his right hand and sucked in the air. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound of something breaking through the air was instantly heard. The Great Annihilation Divine Talisman that the young man had just taken out instantly left his hand and flew rapidly toward Yi Chen. The young man who was about to activate the Great Annihilation Divine Talisman changed his expression again when he saw this. However, before he could react, a huge force appeared out of thin air and imprisoned him on the spot. The skinny follower shuddered when he saw this, but he immediately forced himself to calm down. In the next second, the skinny follower looked at Yi Chen with a puzzled face and then bowed. "You of Beech, Lord Beech, why are you attacking our young palace master? You of Beech, Wuji Palace has never offended you. Is there some misunderstanding?" The plump follower finally recovered from his panic when he heard the words of the skinny follower. After which, he bowed and said to Yi Chen. In the sky, Yi Chen, who had just stored the great annihilation divine talisman in the young man's hand into the small world, smiled coldly and then shouted, "Die!" As soon as Yi Chen's words fell, the sound of thunder shook the sky instantly. Kaboom! At the same time, 2 blue lightning bolts as thick as an arm appeared out of thin air and then directly struck the 2 followers of the young man. Boom! Boom! The sound of 2 bodies exploding was heard immediately. The 2 followers of the young man were directly blasted into pieces by the violent lightning bolts as thick as an arm. At this moment, countless pieces of charred flesh with traces of blood in them, as well as white bone fragments with traces of blackish-red color, directly exploded, and then splattered everywhere. "Bastard, I'm here and you're still pretending. You really don't know how to write the word, die." Thinking of this, Yi Chen curled his lips in disdain. Then, he looked at the young man and asked, "What did the Wang family of Luo City and the Lu family of Xin City hinder your plans?" The young man was young Master Zhang. He wanted to obtain De Qiao and Xiao Qiao's souls, so he created the Royal Palace assassination incident. If not for Wang Chang's confession, Yi Chen would have continued to believe that the mastermind behind the palace assassination incident wanted to use Yi Chen to destroy the Wang family of Luo City and the Lu family of Xin City. Of course, this was just a hypothesis. The real situation was that Yi Chen knew the truth and chased them all the way here. However, this wasn't important. What was important was the reason why young Master Zhang created the palace assassination and conveniently plotted against the Wang family of Luo City and the Lu family of Xin City. To be more precise, if it weren't for the fact that the Luo City's Wang clan and the Xinqing City's Lu clan were hindering this young palace master of Wuji Palace, he basically wouldn't have deliberately schemed against those 2 clans. The reason why Yi Chen asked young Master Zhang was that he wanted to know the reason behind this. To be more precise, Yi Chen wanted to know if there were any treasures in this incident. If there were, Yi Chen would naturally take them away. If there weren't, it wouldn't hinder Yi Chen at all. It was just a matter of a sentence. As soon as Yi Chen's words fell, young Master Zhang, who was confined to the spot, was suddenly stunned. He originally thought that Yi Chen would ask him why he attacked De Qiao and Xiao Qiao. Who would have thought that Yi Chen didn't ask about that at all? Instead, he asked about the Wang family of Luo City and the Lu family of Xin City. After coming back to his senses, young Master Zhang glanced at Yi Chen and said, "Yi Chen, many people are afraid of your coldness and brutality, but I'm not. Because I know very well that you won't let any of your enemies live." So, when Yi Chen heard this, he glanced at young Master Zhang and asked, "So?" When young Master Zhang heard this, he looked at Yi Chen playfully and continued, "So? Yi Chen, are you really so childish that I'll succumb to your fear and tell you everything?" When Yi Chen heard this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He then looked at young Master Zhang and said, "You're very calm and confident. Perhaps you're not even afraid of your soul being destroyed." When young Master Zhang heard this, he curled his lips in disdain and said, "Why would I be afraid? It's just death. As for your soul, Yi Chen, are you sure you brought your brain with you? You're already dead. Even if your soul survives, it can't escape a bowl of Meng Po's soup. Why should I be afraid?" When Yi Chen heard this, he wasn't angry at all. Instead, he looked calmly at young Master Zhang and said, "Originally, I wasn't going to use that method because it would consume my luck." When Yi Chen said this, his eyes suddenly narrowed and a bone-piercing chill surged out. In the next second, Yi Chen continued coldly, "However, if it's just you, it really won't consume much of my luck." "You? What are you trying to do?" Young Master Zhang's expression changed drastically when he heard this. He then shouted at Yi Chen in shock. What young Master Zhang had just shown was that he wasn't afraid of death. Even if his soul was destroyed, he wouldn't be afraid. But in reality, How could he not be afraid? To be more precise, young Master Zhang's so-called fearlessness of death was just an act. This could be easily seen from how he deliberately mocked Yi Chen and insulted Yi Chen. To be more precise, young Master Zhang wanted to anger Yi Chen so that Yi Chen would directly kill him. And this was why he was suddenly so scared. After all, Yi Chen's words clearly told young Master Zhang one thing. That was, other than extorting a confession through torture, Yi Chen could use other methods on young Master Zhang. In this way, young Master Zhang's desire for a quick death was unquestionably shattered. When Yi Chen heard young Master Zhang's words, which were full of fear, he smiled coldly. Then, with a thought, a huge amount of divine sense instantly rushed towards young Master Zhang's head. In the blink of an eye, it forcibly shattered the protective shield of young Master Zhang's divine sense and rushed into young Master Zhang's divine sense. In the next second, Yi Chen's divine sense violently pulled out the soul hidden in young Master Zhang's divine sense. Then, it directly rushed into young Master Zhang's soul and began to forcibly search young Master Zhang's memories. What Yi Chen was doing now was soul-searching. It was very violent, very evil, and would consume luck. Although soul-searching didn't consume a lot of providence, it was still a consumption. Originally, Yi Chen did not intend to use this method. After all, Yi Chen walked the imperial path of luck. He wanted to plunder the luck of heaven and earth, not consume it. But now, Yi Chen had no choice but to use it, because Yi Chen did not have time to continue wasting time with young Master Zhang. As for the trace of luck that would be automatically consumed after the soul searching because of the restrictions of heaven and earth, Yi Chen did not care about it at all. This was because the World War was about to begin. Yi Chen would seize even more luck from overseas countries. Chapter 867. It was also because of this that Yi Chen had directly used Soul Search, after young Master Zhang had declared that he would rather die than submit. As for the fact that soul-searching would consume providence, this was a restriction of the laws of heaven and earth. Even if Yi Chen didn't like it, he couldn't change this rule. However, this wasn't important. What was important was that Yi Chen could obtain a huge amount of providence from overseas. Therefore, soul-searching young Master Zhang's providence consumption was just a drop in the bucket. Just as Yi Chen's spirit sense started to forcefully flip through young Master Zhang's memories, young Master Zhang's body started to tremble crazily. This was because of the pain in his soul and also because of the pain in his body. The incomparably intense pain attacked young Master Zhang's nerves and soul wave after wave. However, no matter how wide young Master Zhang's mouth was, he couldn't make a single sound. Time passed bit by bit. Young Master Zhang's memories kept flashing through Yi Chen's spirit sense. This process only stopped when Yi Chen's spirit sense probed the memories related to the Luo City Wang family and the Xin City Lu family. In the next second, Yi Chen retracted his spirit sense. Then, he saw the light in Yi Chen's eyes explode. Damn, I was wondering why this bastard wanted to scheme against the Luo City Wang family and the Xin City Lu family. It turned out that it was because of the spirit mines under the territories of these two families. The spirit stones produced by the spirit mines were very important cultivation resources for players who automatically became cultivators after reaching the mortal evolution state. The Luo City Wang family and the Xin City Lu family each had a large spirit mine under the ground. There were huge amounts of superior-grade spirit stones inside. As for whether there were supreme-grade spirit stones, that was unclear. However, this wasn't important. What was important was that those two large spirit mines could increase the cultivation speed of Yi Chen's army by 2 to 5 times. Although this was on the premise that Yi Chen's army had to reach the mortal evolution state, this was a piece of cake for Yi Chen. This was because after Yi Chen attended the wedding, he was going to go overseas. Not only could Yi Chen plunder the providence of heaven and earth there, but he could also train his soldiers. To be more precise, It was to allow soldiers who had yet to reach the great perfection of the saint level to kill foreigners at will and gain experience to increase their strength. It was very simple and also very violent. As for being inhumane, that was nonsense. This was because even if Yi Chen didn't make a move, those foreign players would join forces to attack the Three Kingdoms beginners area. Could it be that Yi Chen decided to give up just because what he was doing was too cruel and inhumane? Nonsense. If Yi Chen did that, how could he still be an emperor? He might as well go to bed. When all the soldiers reached the saint-level perfection stage, Yi Chen would be able to let them come to the real world and break through to the mortal evolution state. This way, the soldiers would be able to speed up their cultivation. As for the soldiers reaching the mortal evolution state, they would be sealed by the Heaven Tao in the novice region of the Three Kingdoms. If it was before, Yi Chen would be worried. But now Yi Chen wasn't worried. This was because the Samsara Legion and the White Horse Army had obtained the identity of Heavenly Soldier. The Heaven Tao in the novice region of the Three Kingdoms couldn't seal these two legions at all. The day after tomorrow would be the start of the World War, and the border barrier would disappear. At that time, he would kill his way over and plunder the province of the foreign countries while training his soldiers, but for now, he would destroy Wuji Palace first. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's killing intent soared to the sky. In the next second, Yi Chen raised his right hand and slapped at young Master Zhang, who was foaming at the mouth and had his eyes rolled back. Boom! The air shook and a huge force appeared out of nowhere. In that instant, young Master Zhang, who had been foaming at the mouth with his eyes rolled back in his head, suddenly felt his eyes pop out of their sockets. Then he saw his body explode. Bits of flesh and blood, along with bits of bone and organs, splattered everywhere. Looking at the pieces of flesh on the ground, Yi Chen smiled coldly. Then, he turned around and looked at the guards of Wuji Palace on the wall of Wuji City. They had noticed Yi Chen's arrival long ago, but no one dared to open their mouths. No one dared to move. It was because of fear and also because of terror. It couldn't be helped. In the hearts of all the players, Yi Chen was the synonym of death. Thinking about it, Yi Chen usually didn't interact with the players. Once he did, there would be corpses everywhere. Looking at the guards of Wuji Palace on the wall, Yi Chen curled his lips in disdain. Then, he raised his right hand and clenched it. Bang! The air in Yi Chen's right hand instantly exploded. In the next second, the sound of thunder that shook the heavens and earth rang out. Boom! 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 Hundreds of thousands of lightning bolts appeared out of nowhere. Then, with an aura that could destroy the heavens and earth, they fell straight down. At this moment, the heavens and earth lit up, and lightning danced wildly. Boom! 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 After a series of explosions, Wuji City turned into ruins. Looking at the ruins of Wuji City, Yi Chen sneered. Then, he flew straight to the ruins of Wuji City, where the entrance of the secret realm was still shining with blue light. This was the opportunity that Wuji Palace had obtained before the meteor fell. It was also because of this opportunity that Wuji Palace built Wuji City here. Arriving at the entrance of the secret realm, Yi Chen stepped in and entered the secret realm. At this moment, an angry roar suddenly rang out. "How dare you! How dare you trespass into the secret realm? Die for me!" As soon as the voice fell, a sharp sword arrived. Yi Chen, who had just appeared in the secret realm, didn't even look at it. He raised his right hand and grabbed the long sword. A dang sound was heard and the attack stopped. Yi Chen cultivated the 9 revolutions mysterious art, a chaotic level cultivation technique. His body and primordial spirit were tyrannical. Not to mention that the long sword was only a heaven-level weapon, even an immortal weapon wouldn't be able to hurt Yi Chen. "You? Who are you?" An inexplicable cry of horror was heard. When Yi Chen heard this, he glanced at the middle-aged man who attacked him. Then, he looked at the small lake in the secret realm. Half of the water was steaming hot, while the other half was cold. This Wuji Palace was really lucky. In this secret realm, there was actually a lake that contained essence cleansing stone and marrow cleansing stone. Essence cleansing stone and marrow cleansing stone were special treasures. Just one of them didn't have much effect. Only when the two were combined could it strengthen the body and improve the bone structure. Of course, the premise was that the two of them had to be placed in the water and then bathed in the water that had been modified by them. It was also because of this reason that Yi Chun thought that Wuji Palace was really lucky. After all, if Wuji Palace encountered the pure essence cleansing stone and marrow cleansing stone, they might not be able to understand the correct usage of the essence cleansing stone and marrow cleansing stone. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was the effect of essence cleansing stone. Of course, this was for mortals. If the body was already extraordinary, it wouldn't have much effect. However, this wasn't important. What was important was that Yi Chun could take away the essence cleansing stone and marrow cleansing stone from the lake in the secret realm and bring it to Reincarnation Immortal City for the soldiers and the people in the city to use. With this, the soldiers and the people in Reincarnation Immortal City could improve their bone structure and strengthen their body. Moreover, it was an overall improvement. In this way, the future generations of the people would have higher aptitudes. Not bad, not bad. Thinking of this, Yi Chun couldn't help but smile. Then, he kicked at the middle-aged man who was dumbfounded because his long sword was caught. Bang! The middle-aged man was instantly kicked away by Yi Chun. Then, the middle-aged man's body exploded in midair. Walla walla. Two sounds were heard. The middle-aged man's internal organs and intestines all flowed out. At this moment, the items in his bag also burst out. Yi Chun, who didn't have any reaction at first, saw the items that the middle-aged man burst out and his eyes lit up. F***ck. This bastard actually had so many essence cleansing stones and marrow cleansing stones. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.